some of you want to come forward. We have seats in front. I know that like we use in the classroom, we go at the rear side of a classroom, but it's not a classroom today, then feel free to come in front. Thank you. As the president of EucoLight, I'm the Association of Collection and Recycling of Lighting Products. I'm very pleased to welcome you for this workshop about online sales of non-compliant products. As a WE EPR scheme, our original concern was mainly oriented to the electrical equipment, you may understand, and especially the consequence of online free riding on the level playing field, on the take-back service of waste, which is not delivered to consumers, and the potential impact on the waste collection performances. All these potential consequences were presented by our colleagues from WE Forum a year ago in a colloque, in a conference, which was very interesting, and pretty detailed in a report from the OECD, which is publicized in February this year. Nevertheless, online free riding is not only a problematic of electrical equipment, it impacts also other EPR, like packaging. We have a colleague from packaging here today, welcome. It impacts also the payment of duty, import duties and taxes. It impacts also the conformity of the products, the non-adherence of domestic product standard, and so on and so on. That's why today we took the opportunity to invite colleagues and officials from several sectors, and many thanks to the speakers who accepted to come, high-level speakers, I would say, and I hope that you will help us to see clearly what we can do all together to deal with this problematic. This workshop, if I may, must be seen as an opportunity for all stakeholders to exchange in a fair manner about the feedback of various sectors and potential inspiring solutions. And I would say that solutions are starting from awareness of stakeholders, including online sellers, of course, and platform, sharing good practices, which is the beginning and it's very important, best enforcement of the law, that makes sense, but also, makes sense also, reinforcement of the law for those who deliberately escape their obligation. We think that basically many actors are not fulfilling their obligation because they are not well informed, or they don't see clearly what they can do. But we also think, even it's a small part of the players, that some are deliberately out of the law. To that extent, I wish you a fruitful afternoon, and I give the floor to Marc, who is the Secretary General of EucoLight, and who will moderate our workshop. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Hervé. Dear all, the word issue has been mentioned in order to fully understand the issue of non-compliance in online sales and to find solutions. It is first necessary to understand the scale of the issue. And to that aim, a trade association of WE compliance schemes in the UK, called the WE Scheme Forum, has made a study. And our vice chairman, Nigel Harvey, who is the CEO of EucoLight, is going to tell us something about the state of the art with this study.
So this presentation is going to talk about the problems of non-compliance in one particular sector, the waste electrical and electronic equipment sector, and in particular the problem of a lack of level playing field. What we all crave as businesses is a level playing field, and if we can get that, we're happy, and competition is fair and competition works. But in the absence of that, we have real problems, and that's what I think we have at the moment, an absence of a level playing field. And so we're going to talk about the large and growing scale of non-compliance with the waste electrical equipment recycling requirements. Going to talk also about some similar findings that were brought in by the OECD. The OECD published a report earlier this year. There's problems those creates. In particular, a brief look at the fulfillment house model That is the methodology that a number of online marketplaces use to sell product to consumers. And finally, some suggested legislative actions and enforcement actions that might be taken. So let's look first of all at the large scale of free riders. Now this is a small study that EucoLight did on our own, and we went on to a well-known online marketplace and searched on LED light bulb. We looked at the first 120 records, and we were able to look to the published register of compliant companies. We're fortunate that in this particular area, it's very easy to identify if a company is compliant or not. And of those first 120, 91 were not compliant. 91 out of 120. And of those 91 free riders, 15 were based in the EU, 2 in the US, 74 in China and Hong Kong. And of those 91 free riders, 65 were available for next day delivery. So in other words, there was product being offered for sale on this major marketplace, hi Maria, that was not compliant and yet was already in the country available for next day delivery, sitting in warehouses. 26 were longer day delivery, but also all of those products were multiple packs, large numbers of LED light bulb per order, and also they had large numbers of English language reviews. So imagine the number of times you buy a product online, how many times do you actually bother to write a review? Not that often. So if you see a product with hundreds of English language reviews, think just how many purchases might have been made. Many, many thousands. So that's the study we did just on light bulbs, and then we expanded it, and the We Scheme Forum in the UK looked at a range of different products. And the key area in here is to look at the products along the top. So we've got tablet PCs, power tools, fitness watches, display screens, LED light bulbs, electric health, hair care, and washing machines and dryers. And look at the red line at the bottom. The proportion of product for each of those different categories, using broadly the same methodology that I just described, was also non-compliant. And it's frighteningly huge. It's frightening. So let's look at that. We've got LED light bulbs in the middle at 76%, 2 to the left, fitness watches, 88%. Power tools, 54%, electric hair care, 50%, tablet PCs, 40%. So the smaller products and those that are less costly seem to have a higher level of non-compliance. The more expensive products, like large household appliances, only 8%, and display equipment, televisions, 12%. So a relatively small number there. But that gives you a snapshot of the scale of non-compliance. It's big. It's really, really big. But it's not just us seeing this. The OECD did a study I mentioned and published the report earlier this year. They've estimated across all electrical products the non-compliance level is somewhere between 5 and 10%, but at a higher level for smaller products. And again, that reflects very accurately what the We Scheme Forum discovered in the United Kingdom. And the online sales are growing rapidly. As we all know, consumers are migrating their purchases away from bricks and mortar retailers into online. So if the proportion of online sales, non-compliance is so high, as you increase the level of online sales, inevitably the level of total non-compliance goes up. It's just a mathematical, natural consequence. The OECD did recommend a number of solutions, including making online marketplaces liable for the product that they sell through their portals. So there's a big scale of non-compliance, and I think that's quite clear. But what are the problems that this creates? In this first sector, the we sector, it undermines the financial sustainability of the recycling systems. recycling of electrical products is paid for by the producers who put new product on the market. So they all between them share out and pay for the cost of recycling. If only a small proportion of them are paying that cost, then a disproportionate burden falls upon them. And so legitimate operators are put at a competitive disadvantage. And in some sectors, the cost of WEEE is actually quite a big proportion of the total cost, maybe 10 or 20%. So if an online non-compliant operator is able to avoid between 10 and 20% of cost, that's a fantastic business opportunity, isn't it? It's great. You're immediately more competitive than the legitimate companies. And legitimate operators end up paying more because they're paying for all of the recycling of the product that then subsequently arises. And in truth, we've had companies say to us, why should I bother complying? I can see the level of non-compliance through these online marketplaces. Why should I put in the effort and the money to do the right thing? And actually, I can understand that. I have a lot of sympathy with that. You know, when you see the level of non-compliance, it just doesn't seem fair. And of course, it's also damaging high street retailers. And you know, the market is moving from online from the high street to online. That's clear. But if it was a level playing field, it would be less of a problem than a non-level playing field, which means the high street and legitimate operators are being increasingly penalised because they comply. And there is a risk of a vicious spiral. A smaller number of companies are actually paying the right cost. A larger proportion are paying no cost. The number of compliant companies gradually falls. Their costs go up, and it just goes down and down. And ultimately, you've got an unfunded or underfunded waste stream. And sadly, consumers don't understand the problem. They assume they're buying product. They assume it's safe. They assume it complies. That's, you know, explaining the exact problem to consumers is quite a challenge. So how does this fulfillment house model work? Here's a possible simple transaction route that might take place. So we've got an exporter based in Guangzhou. They send a bulk shipment to a fulfillment house who've got a warehouse in Lille. In Lille, they then pick, pack and ship according to a customer order and send it to a consumer in Ghent. And there's a huge volume of product goes through this fulfillment house model. So the exporter has shipped product into Lille, but the consumer buys through the online portal and through the warehouse. And the question is, who in that scenario is the importer or the responsible person? Whose job is it to make sure product complies? That's the question. And you know, we've had lawyers look at the fulfillment house contracts operated, and they are very cleverly written. Because you know who the importer is in that scenario? It's actually the exporter in Guangzhou. So the fulfillment house says to the exporter, your duty is to ship product compliant to arrive in my warehouse. My responsibility is to open my warehouse doors, to put it on the shelves, but you still own the product. It's still your product. You keep title to the goods, and you're responsible for doing everything to make sure it gets imported into my warehouse correctly. So the exporter is also the importer. That is a fundamental problem, because how easy is it to take legal action against the responsible person if the responsible person is in Guangzhou? And remember back to the numbers of non-compliant product. Over half of it was coming from outside of the EU, and so no matter what effective enforcement network is set up within the EU, it's really hard to take action elsewhere. And it's really important that products must comply with the regulations of the destination country. So equipment supplied into country A, into Belgium, needs to meet the regulations and obligations of Belgium. And it's true that extended police responsibility does require compliance with different different systems in different member states. That's the law. there are also some EU-wide compliance solutions available. Let's look at some solutions, though. As an immediate, it would be great to see more cooperation between compliance schemes and online marketplaces, and we'd love to see that happening and actually working together to find a solution. But obviously, a worked together solution is not the same as being required to comply with the law. In the long term, there have got to be amendments to directives, e-commerce directives, directives, others that make online marketplaces responsible for products sold. In the short term, it might be possible for the Commission to amend the Blue Guide. At the moment, there are some conflicting statements in there regarding online sales, and actually making it consistent and clear would help in this area. And finally, a few more short-term opportunities for member states. It would be quite possible for member states to try to set up voluntary arrangements to encourage compliance with individual marketplaces. That's being looked at in the UK at the moment. It can't be a long-term solution. In the long term, you can't encourage people to comply with the law just because they like to. Really, you encourage people to comply with the law because they have to. Amending national legislation to make online marketplaces responsible is quite possible now. There's nothing in the directive that prevents member states from doing that. There's nothing that would prevent member states from amending their legislation to make it possible to fine intermediaries who knowingly sell non-compliant product. And finally, they could even take legal action against the company based in Guangzhou. The company based in Guangzhou wouldn't turn up to the court, wouldn't defend their case, obviously. But once you've got a court judgment against it, is it then possible simply to seize goods from the online marketplace warehouse, seize non-compliant goods? And when you start to disrupt non-compliance like that in a very practical way, it can have a big impact. So thank you very much. That's a kick-off for the afternoon, and I look forward to discussing it later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, to introduce us to the study of non-compliance in online marketplaces. One specific aspect, very tangible, of non-compliance is product safety. For that, in 2017, the UK Lighting Association, LIA, made a study, and I will not talk too much. I would like that Yeva Verdayan introduce you to this study and tells you something about it. You have noted that we moved directly to the next speaker. The purpose, and you have seen the agenda, is to have all our sessions compact, not too long speech, and then at the end of the session have a moment for question and answers and debate. That will be before the coffee break. Yeva, the floor is yours.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Eva, and I represent the Lighting Industry Association in the UK. Right, so here we are the largest Europe's trading association for the lighting. We also have our laboratory, which is now the largest in Europe. It's independent and it's UCAS accredited, and it's served just for lighting and lighting only. So over the past few years, our members has been concerned about the non-compliant products entering in the market who are unchecked, causing confusion and unfair competition. So what we, as LA, done so far, so the LA has been involved in a number of national and European market surveillance projects. We are currently working with the trading standards to become government-approved testing facility. And we also launched 2 schemes projects. One is for our members, where it's a free health check to see how they comply with the compliance scheme, and also mystery shopper, a market surveillance for the retailers and wholesalers. So a little bit briefly about our membership compliance scheme. So why are we doing it? So first of all, if we are to criticize others, we need to make sure our house is in place. It also supports our members who seek compliance, so we guide them and making sure that they comply with CE requirements and other legislations, and it adds value to their membership. So how we run the scheme, all our members has to participate. It is membership requirement. We select one product randomly from each of our member product range. Then we request a technical file. They have to respond within 10 days, as if they would have to respond if they are approached by market surveillance authorities. We review the technical file and report the non-compliances if we identified. We draft a corrective actions plan and we follow up. We have identified some issues, so not all our members are perfect. Main typical issues are that the test reports refer to withdrawn standards, there is a marking issues, and also a non-conformities within the reports where they say that product can operate in high ambient temperatures, however it's been tested to normal temperature, which is 25 degrees. So it's kind of false claim. And now about the mystery shopper, retail market surveillance. So what are we doing? So over the last 18 months, a number of member companies, members of the public has approached us and they said, you know, there's loads of non-compliant products in the market, consumers buying, they don't know what they're buying, and it raises concerns. So we launched the market surveillance to identify these issues. We also seek to engage with the retailers and help them, you know, to support the market compliance. And so far, we selected 7 major retailers, both online and a high street. We select one retailer each month. We choose 5 to 10 products that undergoes lab risk assessment or the safety assessment to agreed scope. The engineers draft a report. We then contact the retailers and we say, these are the results. Would you like to cooperate? And if the safety issues are identified, we do report to trading standards. So these are the results so far. We selected 24 products from a well-known high street retailers. 5 passed with no issues. They were pretty much perfect. And 19 are currently being tested, but there is no obvious indication of non-compliances. It's a different story about the online retailers. We purchased 11 products. 5 of them failed, showing a serious risk of electric shock. We have 5 that are currently being tested at our laboratory, and they do show some minor non-conformities, and only 1 passed. So I'll give you some examples. So these are the 5 products that were identified non-compliance. You can see that risk levels vary from high to critical, such as electric strength issue. There is missing key markings, and also they pose electric shock possibility. And they all were marked CE. So this is the first example. This is a wall light. As you can see, CE mark present, there is a Roche mark, FC, and there is no postal contact details. So if the product would cause a fire, there is no information who's responsible for it. And also, the products were supplied with the complementary lamps that also CE marked, as it has to be. And we were able to disassemble lamps using no tools at all. I can show you briefly the video how quickly you can disassemble them. Here you go. It's exposed to live parts just like that. Also, one of the products were fitted with E27 lamp holder, sold as E27. As a lot of manufacturers argue that E26 and E27 are interchangeable, and E26 bulb can fit in the E27 lamp holder and vice versa. However, E26 is 26 millimeters and it's 120 volts and it's US standard. E27 is E27 millimeters and 240 volts and EU standard. So really, if it fits and works, doesn't necessarily mean that the product complies with the electric standard. Let's say if the lamp holder is E27 or E26 in this case, and you try to fit E27 lamp holder, the lamp holder thread, obviously you can fit in and it works. But as you see in the complementary lamps are not something that can handle the taking out. So if you take out the lamp, it breaks, it comes out all the live parts, and there is a possibility of electric shock. And it's also called mega shock. Right, so far, what actions we taken? So this product has been reported to the trading standards, and I have received confirmation they are being processed to be taken out from the market. We have published a number of articles, one of them A1. We shared results with the Which, and we also raised this subject with the Lighting Europe. However, I would like to bring the attention to the fact that removing 5 products from the market does not solve the issue. So for the consumer market, if you type in any online retailer, a light, will come over 1 million results. I think eBay was 3.9 million. If you type light bulb, it's over 100,000, and light fitting is only 10,000 and more. But it is not limited to consumer market. You can look that if you type LED panel, will come up over 50,000 results, high bay over 1,000, street light over 30,000. And I think I saw the record cheap LED panel, which is £9. It's also CE marked. So in the conclusion, we all agree that there is a need to change in law. Fulfillment houses, they are not responsible for compliance, and we need to make someone responsible if someone's house burns down. We encourage to implement a stronger tool for market surveillance authorities to ensure that the market is policed and the companies, comply with the applicable laws. And also, we know that Amazon, Alibaba, and eBay recently announced a rapid response to the dangerous product. But that's not enough, because there is 1 million of them and 1,000 of products. So, yeah, that's it. Short and brief.
And on time. Thank you, Yeva. Another sector that was very worried about the problem of online non-compliance is the packaging industry, especially in reference to the free riding of the waste management fees. And for that reason, I'm very happy that we received today Monika Rumenska from EXPRA, the Pan-European Association for Packaging Compliance Schemes. And Monika is going to explain us what is the issue of online free riding in her field.
Thank you. So I will start with very few words about our organization. It is Extended Producer Responsibility Alliance, which means organizations that involves members which are packaging recovery organizations. We have currently 26 members varying from countries like Malta and Cyprus to Spain and Italy. Our members are owned by the industry, and which for us is very important, they work on non-for-profit basis. They, among themselves, have over 20 years of experience and best practices in waste management. and the cooperation between them started much before Expro was established 5 years ago. Our members provide recycling and recovery of over 20 million tons per year, and they provide also over 200 million people with education and communication campaigns. Again, together with, of course, infrastructure for the collection, sorting, and recycling of packaging. I would run very quickly through the legislative framework because I believe later today representative of DG Environment will focus also on these issues. As you all know, the Waste Framework Directive puts a focus on transparency in waste management operations. And among the Article 8A, it is mentioned also the requirements regarding registration information and reporting to be met by the responsible persons or an authorized representative from their territory, which of course includes the online sales. As you can see, this is also a part of the new legislation. It is very important to provide, as it was already mentioned, to provide a level playing field. So there should be not a disproportionate regulatory burden on producers, not depending on the quantities of the products they put on the market. Again, in the Waste Framework Directive in Recital 9A, there is again mentioned e-commerce enterprises who should again take all responsibilities that the other producers have. Currently, it was already mentioned that the volume of direct sales to household and businesses from overseas is growing at the estimations because there are no actual current data available, but the estimations are that it is about 20-30% of the market across different waste streams in the Union. And already some data about the products about the WEEE were presented, and you can imagine that all these goods come packed. So all these estimations concern the packaging that is accompanying the products that are brought both by the individual people in different countries. This is just, again, information from the retail trade from 2015 to 2017. You can see the increase in these processes. So it is really a very important and growing problem. And as it was mentioned, it is very important to provide a level playing field for the companies who diligently register themselves with the packaging organizations in the respective country and pay their fees for the end-of-life management of their packaging. I think we all agree that the distant sellers who do not take their responsibility represent a source of free riding, which means that they do not register with the packaging recovery organizations in the countries where their products are sold or used. They are respectively not financing the end-of-life management of their products, and there is no responsible contact person in the countries where they do not have warehouse operations. And all this leads to unfair costs, it is already mentioned. Of course, this leads to competitive disadvantages for the national producers or the producers who diligently implement their responsibilities, and which for us is also very important. This impacts the reporting, because if 20% or 30% are somewhere in the air, then the reporting for the recycling and collection and all relevant activities related to packaging waste management should be not correct. It was already quoted the OECD report, which is, we believe, for now the most important and useful document developed so far. So I will repeat a little bit what was said before, but it is very important to have strengthening of the enforcement and the coordination between the jurisdictions between different countries and different products. It is also very important to have relevant legislation or at least some guidelines from the institutions. And it is very important for the obliged entities to be aware, to be made aware, so they have the relevant information, and to be easy for them to follow the regulations, so simplify transaction tracking and to make use of the points of contact which already exist, and mechanism, of course, where it is possible. I would like to show you two case studies from the Netherlands and Belgium. which show how free riding, and especially in e-commerce, is how they try to solve the issue of this problem. Just overall information how it works in the Netherlands. So all companies that put on the market packed goods have to register with the Afvalfonds. This is the Dutch packaging organization according to the national legislation. And the free riders, the ordinary free riders, which can be either e-commerce but also other companies that just import products and do not follow the legislation. The organization have different opportunities to check them to see if they implement their responsibilities. This is via the trade register. This is according the activity code, the number of employees, and of course they have also, for example, information about the surface of the company warehouses. So all information that can be used is collected and analyzed by Afvalfonds, and also it relates on the weight of the packaging on the market. Again, this BIC on NACA code, and also they follow if the company is registered, if it was previously registered but stopped its registration. If it is not registered, obviously it can be non-compliant. But whether it should comply or not, this is again an issue that has to be followed by the organization. By the way, I missed to mention that Afvalfonds, the Dutch packaging organization, decided together with the parliament to have a threshold. So companies who put on the market less than 50,000 kilograms of packaging per year are not obliged, so they are not free riders. This is because upon their investigation they found that 95% of the packaging put on the market is, the responsible companies are about 1,000. So they estimated that it is more important to have the bigger companies who are responsible for almost 100% of the packaging in order to simplify things. Regarding the foreign web shops, they are using different methods to get the information which is missing. So they use, as you can see, online research. They watch commercials to see if the company or the online shop is providing products on the territory of the Netherlands. They speak with companies also which are registered with the Afvalfond. So if the company knows company which is internet seller, they can also report to them, and they can follow up this with the following actions. So first, they send information to the companies about the legislation, so the company should be informed. Then they are contacted, and there is a discussion or a meeting to see if they are obliged. In a case, there are some cases, unfortunately, when companies refuse to provide information, then the Afvalfondsverpakkingen sends reminders. And after 5 trials to contact and to have this information received, the names of these companies are handed over to the inspectorate within the Ministry of Environment. So these are actions that our member from the Netherlands takes in order to provide that all companies who put packed goods on the market follow the legislation in the country. For Belgium, it is also very interesting case. The colleagues from FOSPlus, the packaging organization for household packaging in Belgium, together with other stakeholders and other partners, developed a very interesting guide. So first, the national legislation in Article 2 in the cooperation agreement, there is a definition of the party responsible for packaging. So these are companies who release products on the Belgian market who have not been packed in Belgium, very shortly put. For imports, the explanatory memorandum of the cooperation agreement states that when a foreign company conducts its sales activities on the Belgian territory, then it is responsible for the packaging. As I mentioned, the colleagues from FOSPlus, together with the Valipack, this is the Belgian organization responsible for commercial and industrial packaging, and with all other partners you see on this slide, developed a guidance on e-commerce packaging. So how to decide if a producer is responsible for, if a producer or online shop or platform is responsible for the end-of-life treatment of packaging. As you can see on the right, these are the two normal ways. So the packaging, the product with its packaging is bought in Belgium, or the individual brings the product with the packaging from other country. These cases are clear. So in first case, it is the company is responsible because it operates on the territory of Belgium. The second case, when it's imported from other country, then the organization in the other country is responsible because it has been taken from there. But on the left, you can see the situation where the individual buys the product from online, from remote selling. There is, I believe you can find it on the FOSPlus website, and there is one of the authors of this great document here today. So it is a very useful guide because it shows in very detail with many assumptions how you can guess or decide how this functions. So there are different options. For example, the final part of the website name, whether it's BE, whether it's COM, whether it's in the Netherlands or in France, but then the market is obviously Belgium. So there are all this estimation. It's almost detective work to find if a company, even if with the name showing that it operates in France, in the Netherlands, in Germany, actually aims at the Belgian market, respectively. The responsibilities for the packaging are not taken care of. So the measures how to address these issues that we believe will be very useful are, of course, first, online sellers and fulfillment houses should take their role as producer. Respectively, member states should develop provisions to address the specificities of the online sales operations. And online sellers should be also seen as part of the solution, meaning that they should share the information they have on their sales and distribution because this information is available. The issue is how to get it. And again, some quotes and some measures from the OECD report. We believe that to strengthen enforcement, it's very important to have a single electronic register of producers for each jurisdiction. So in this way, the competent authority should be able to follow if there are some unregistered producers. Again, it should be very simple. So simple mechanisms should be allowed for producer organizations to report if they suspect there is a free riders on the market. So they should be able to report this to the institutions, so to assist enforcement. Again, coordination between the actions at supranational level is very important across the European Union, but also with other countries like the United States of America to make the enforcement less daunting for individual territories and again to share costs. And last but not least, there should be mechanisms to make it mandatory for all institutions or authorities which are responsible for trade activities in general to cooperate in a better way, like customs, tax and trading standards officials. So they should work in joint fashion in order to, together with the environmental authorities, to provide that the regulation is kept and it's enforced in the right way. So this is very shortly how the packaging sector sees the problems and possible solutions. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
For your very detailed and factual presentation on the issues in the field of packaging. We have, or you have heard or read about the problem of non-compliance with VAT, with tax. Well, it is a situation that puts brick and mortars retailers at a disadvantage. Let's say, to present the situation, we have asked a specialist, a passionate man about the topic, Mr. Richard Allen. Richard is the founder and the spokesperson of Retailers Against VAT Abuse Schemes, RAVAS, and he has assisted the European Commission with information relevant to the development of the digital single market. Richard, welcome, and we are looking forward to your presentation.
Hello, testing. Thank you very much. My background is nothing to do with lighting at all. I'm from the music industry, and I've been involved in music and music retails on the internet since 1994. So I've been right from the very beginning of internet retail, even slightly before Amazon. So who is the group that I formed? I formed a group called Retailers Against VAT Abuse Schemes. It was set up to give a voice to all retailers having to compete with unrestrained VAT abuses that undermine their business. It's not politically aligned, we're not a political tax campaign group, and it's concerned with abuses of VAT that distort competition, either through avoidance or evasion. Why was RAVAS needed? Well, basically nobody was taking action against online VAT abuse. Consumers do not want to pay VAT, and businesses and some politicians do not want to be seen to support VAT. So RAVAS was needed to represent anonymous businesses who wanted to ensure the enforcement of VAT. If anyone knows Latin, they can pronounce that, but basically, who will guard the guards themselves, which was the issue we found. We essentially had to remind the authorities what their duties were with regards to policing the VAT system. So what has RAVAS achieved? Well, we were responsible for ending the Channel Islands VAT-free mail order industry. I don't know if anyone had heard about that. But they were abusing an import VAT exemption called low-value consignment relief, shipping container loads of goods out in ever-increasing quantities to Jersey and Guernsey, mailing them back and taking advantage of a VAT exemption. It completely annihilated UK music retailers, and it was ended in 2012. But we ended it by making a complaint to the European Commission, who then threatened the UK with infraction proceedings. So they had no choice but to remove it. We also highlighted, with the help of vatfraud.org, the evasion of VAT by non-EU sellers operating from EU warehouses via Amazon and eBay. This is, earlier Nigel was talking about warehouses with goods in coming from China. Well, these goods are being sold from EU warehouses with no VAT at all on Amazon and eBay. So if you buy something, you don't get charged VAT. And the problem is, if anyone goes pursuing the people that are selling it, they're in China. And of course, the warehouse owner has escaped it through the clauses in his contract, so he's not liable for it either. We pushed the issue of VAT fraud in online retail up the agenda at the EU Commission when I first contacted them in 2006, I think it was. It was very low down the agenda at that point. They knew there would be a problem, but it hadn't been highlighted. By the time we'd finished with the Channel Islands issue, they realised it was massive. And that inspired directly and indirectly jurisdictions such as the UK, Germany and Australia to legislate against VAT evasion on online marketplaces. Once the Commission started paying attention to it, Australia picked up on it because they have a problem. They have a $1,000 VAT exemption, or GST, which of course was ridiculous for Australian retailers because they were having to deal with goods coming in huge quantities up to high values. We were the first body consulted by HMRC regarding the new UK VAT third liability legislation for private online marketplaces. I mean, they claim credit for it, but we suggested it. So that was the first legislation that I'm aware of, and then the Germans started their version of it. But not having to pay VAT is good for the consumer. This is what you quite often hear when you raise this issue with members of the public, because of course they want to pay less. No, because VAT fraud distorts competition by tipping the market in favour of the tax avoider. In this case, Direct Cosmetics v Lawtons is the case that defined or clarified what the definition of VAT avoidance and VAT evasion was. And the Advocate General said in his judgment that it must be pointed out that it is precisely the absence of a measure to prevent VAT avoidance that would perpetuate a distortion of competition to the detriment of undertakings whose sales schemes are structured differently. So essentially, it distorts the market. That is legal speak for what Nigel was talking about earlier with the unlevel playing field. It destroys businesses, VAT avoidance and employment within the EU, thus reducing other tax revenue. Also, employees then start claiming benefits when they lose their job. It gives an artificial advantage to one business over another, and more importantly, online businesses over physical retail. Now, online businesses, although it's more convenient, it's even more convenient when it's 20% cheaper. So what tends to happen is these businesses pick up more and more sales, then shops become affected by it and they stock less. If they stock less, you go in them less. If you go in them less, you buy more online. So it's a vicious circle. Reducing consumer choice. I mean, I've been in my local shop. Sometimes you can't find things now, you know, things like pegs, clothes pegs. You have to buy them on eBay rather than find them in a local shop. Contributes to a race to the bottom for both quality and price. A lot of the products sold online are very poor quality because they're being sold cheaper and cheaper. Finances criminals who are involved in other regulatory abuses, product safety and all the other things that we're talking about here now. So third-party liability for VAT, Article 205 of the VAT Directive allows member states to make an individual, a third party liable for VAT, and they can be such as a tax representative. But additionally, people can be made liable for VAT through the courts if they're involved in fraud. But the case law is very complicated. It's not always easy to show that somebody actually knew that there was a fraud taking place. But I'd recommend people reading Professor Rita de la Ferrier's paper, Tax Fraud and the Rule of Law, which goes into this in great detail. And the point she makes is that at the moment, tax authorities are selectively enforcing VAT for various reasons, cost-saving measures, political pressures, or just ignorance, and in some cases, incompetence. Third, liability for theft. So everyone knows this one. You can't handle stolen goods. If you do, you could be arrested. So the UK Theft Act places a liability on everyone with regards to handling stolen goods. So if you're handling stolen goods, knowing that you know or believe to be stolen, you can basically go to prison. So that sets an incentive for people not to handle stolen goods, which is a very good example of a third-party liability. Then liability for owners of licensed premises. I don't know what the law in Belgium is, but in the UK, under the Licensing Act, landlords of pubs are responsible for everything that happens on their premises. So, and they're told by the authorities that they must act in a police role. Landlords must not sell alcohol to anyone under the age of 18 and ensure that reasonable steps are taken to ensure that a person to whom alcohol is sold is over 18. They must not allow disorderly conduct. They must not allow alcohol to be sold to anyone who is drunk. They must not allow smuggled goods on the premises, and there's actually no limitation on that. So technically a pub, if it was acting as a warehouse, would actually be liable. Presumably that was to cover tobacco and alcohol. They cannot allow unaccompanied children on the premises, and if they break any of these rules, then they lose their license and they can be fined. So they cannot operate if they break any of those rules. We're talking about online retail, but basically it's mail order. So mail order's been around 100 years. I was surprised to find out actually it was started in Wales by Priest Jones in 1861. Then in America we had the Sears catalogue, which was absolutely huge, which was the Amazon of its day. But the problem then was everyone had to receive a paper catalogue, which of course was really time consuming, and you had to print loads of catalogues and send them out. And what internet retail did basically is take exactly the same model, but put the catalogue on the internet, fully updatable, 24 hours a day, no language barriers. As a result, you had a huge increase in cross-border international mail order. I mean, I didn't order anything from, say, another country until the internet really took off, because obviously you couldn't read the catalogue and it was quite difficult to get hold of one, but now it's easy. And we've seen the development of what I call the private online marketplace, or POM. And that is effectively the environment in which all of this kind of behaviour is occurring, in private online marketplaces. So I've done a kind of an example comparison so you can understand how online retail operates if it existed in the real world. So this is online retail imagined as pubs. That's my favourite pub, by the way, in Hedgerley, the White Horse. So this is the first model. So in the early days of the internet, effectively you had different retailers or different pubs competing with each other. Now so if you can imagine, there were different websites competing with each other equally. You didn't have online marketplaces in the early days of the internet. So the landlords of the individual pubs are competing equally with each other for the customers, for their own pubs, and they can set their own rules and their own standards within their pub. The customers can buy directly from each pub. The landlords have no access to the sales data of other landlords' pubs. So each pub is unaware of what the other pub is selling and how much they're selling and to who. The landlords are responsible for preventing underage drinking under the licensing scheme that I told you about, and also for any smuggled goods being sold in their pub. And that's how it operated probably from about 1994 up until the late 90s. So retail online was different websites competing with each other. Marketplaces weren't a big problem. Then we came to eBay took off first of all. So if you can imagine, eBay as a pub would be one pub in which all the other landlords sell their beer in that one pub. And they basically are their tenants of the owner of the pub, which is eBay. They sell their beer to customers in the pub as long as they abide by the rules. So eBay has its own rules, which everyone has to abide by. They pay fees to the operator for the use of the pub. They deal directly with the customers and are paid directly by the customers. They decide the terms and conditions upon which they deal with the customers. The operator of the pub, which is eBay, can access all the sales data of the landlord tenants and their customers. And the operator also claims that the responsibility for underage drinking and the sale of smuggled goods resides with the tenant, not with the owner of the pub. Interestingly, if it was a pub, that would be illegal, because the owner of the pub would be liable under the Licensing Act. So I'm sure you can see here what's happened here is there's been a split in responsibility between the people selling the goods and the people that own the marketplace. This is what Amazon would look like if it was a pub. So basically the owner of the pub sells everything. If you can imagine, there's a pub where there's one person behind the bar acting on behalf of all of the other landlords that sell through that pub. That one person handles the tenant's beer sales, deducts a fee and gives the tenant what is left, decides whether or not a tenant can sell beer in the pub at any time and for any reason. You can be thrown off Amazon's marketplace at any time. And I've had retailers contact me who've been blocked out for weeks because of some kind of problem. There's various reasons why it would happen, but there is actually no safe. You can't appeal to anybody. You get removed from the platform. It dictates the customer service standards that must be met by the tenant. So they dictate all of the terms and conditions. Sells beer in competition with the tenant. So Amazon sells its own products, competing with the people that are selling in its pub. So it sells its own beer against tenants selling beer in the pub. And they charge the tenant extra if the tenant wants any of the beer to be served faster. So they can basically make charges to the tenants if they want to raise the profile of their beer within the pub. And they also claim that any responsibility for anything that happens in that pub is not their responsibility. Now, I'm not criticising this model, I'm just pointing out how this model operates. And obviously lots of people like it because you go to one place and you can buy lots and lots of stuff. But I think it's interesting to see how it looks if you were to put it in a physical environment. So everything we're talking about now is to do with policing online marketplaces. All of the issues that are coming up is how are these new complicated retail models policed? Well, specific measures introduced for VAT to date. Australia has introduced a tax of 10% that's been introduced on all sales by non-Australian sellers, and this is collected by POMs for the government. UK private online marketplaces are liable for VAT if they do not ensure that the seller has a valid VAT number and matching company name and not address, only matching company name. There's a problem there because people are using other people's VAT numbers and names. They don't check to see whether actually it's your VAT number or your name. The UK are looking at split payments to try and collect the VAT, but there's some confusion as to split payments versus split receipts. Splitting someone's credit card payment is really complicated because normally a payment can only be authorised by the payer. Splitting it at the other end is not allowed at the moment. In Germany, they're liable if they do not ensure the seller has a valid VAT number, along with address details, warehousing volumes of sales have to be given, and a German tax agent where the seller is not located in the EU. France and Italy, same as Germany, but the requirement is for a fiscal representative. And the EU are extending VAT MOS to physical goods and scrapping LBCRs so that VAT is collected and paid by the non-EU seller to a central collection hub. Not clear how this will be enforced, but private online marketplaces will be made liable. Private online marketplaces will be made liable in some form for policing VAT collection. These measures are a start, but will not resolve the general problem of a lack of responsibilisation on private online marketplaces that impacts other areas such as counterfeits, product safety and WE regulations. This is the last slide, but the bigger picture is private online marketplaces are a new phenomenon where one company or an individual can wield total control over a private retail universe and avoid responsibility for what takes place there, as I demonstrated with the pub model. The EU recently announced an investigation into the use of data by private online marketplaces. The concern is that data could be obtained from sellers and used by the operators of those marketplaces to gain unfair competitive advantages and distort competition. We're aware of this happening. We've seen examples of it. Private online marketplaces are unregulated environments where criminals can easily operate and avoid liability. They're also, due to the avoidance of regulation, have an unfair advantage over traditional retail models as they avoid costs that traditional retail must absorb. This results in rapid growth and market dominance. So it lowers their costs not having to have all this regulation, which ordinary pubs have to abide by. Our group is of the view that some form of legislative control needs to be exerted over private online marketplaces to ensure the retail environments that they operate are in compliance with the rule of law, and we suggest a licence scheme that operates in a similar way to pubs, i.e. enforces a uniform standard of behaviour and compliance with a revocable licence. So you would be a licensed online marketplace operator. That's the suggestion that we would make, which covers all of the issues, VAT, compliance, of other kinds. It's just simply not practical or even possible for the state to police individual traders operating on a private online marketplace in the same way that it's not possible or practical for the state to police customers in a pub. If you can imagine, if the pub owners weren't liable and the authorities had to go looking for people breaking the rules in pubs, it would be absolutely impossible. And that responsibility should be placed with the operator of the private online marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard, for leading us to those problems in a very holistic manner. In order to get further insight on the intricacies, the details of the legal aspects of VAT at EU level, mostly we have added an additional expert, and it's Dr. Charlène Herbin. She's a senior lawyer with PwC, and she's an internationally recognized specialist on tax policy and litigation. Okay. So Charlène, I hope you will retweet to our event, right? Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, now I can hear it. Excellent. Okay, good. So thanks. I'm going to carry on what Richard explained. Basically, I'm going to go a little bit more into the legal aspect of VAT and e-commerce. And I will start by saying the reason why, basically, VAT needs to be tackled when we address e-commerce. The thing is, VAT was implemented at a time where there was no e-commerce, right? When VAT was implemented in Europe, well, the commerce was still local, so you were going to your bar and you were buying your baguette at the bakery next to you. There was no way you could get your baguette delivered in the morning through a drone flying to your kitchen, but, well, that was a different time. So when you look at that time, and at the time now, things have changed and have evolved. VAT on its hand has not yet evolved, but I will have a more positive look at it than Richard, because I'm going to look at what's going to happen soon, and basically I'm going to bring a more positive note to the future and to e-commerce. So, the issue first. The issue is, as we say, that it's costing a lot of money for businesses to comply with VAT nowadays when you want to enter into e-commerce. The figure, I think, is 8,000 euros per country. So what I mean is if you have business and you want to sell online to other member states, it's going to cost you an average of 8,000 euros just to comply with the regulation of the other member state where you want to sell. So it's quite expensive. Then there is also another issue. The issue is that there is a lack of revenue collection. Let me check, yes, 5 billion of VAT is lacking. So we should have collected in Europe 5 billion VAT more than we did. And among those 5 billion, there are 4 billion that are due to lack of compliance. So just because not complying, there's 4 billion missing. So that's a real issue. And last, not least, clearly, especially here with you, the issue of the level playing field, which is not met. It's clearly an issue when you look at non-EU seller and EU seller. I'll come back to that in a minute. So that was just to plant a little bit the issues. Then here, this is what's going to happen. So this is a VAT e-commerce package. It's dated last year, and we'll see that it will be implemented, it will be implemented from 2019 and 2021, mostly 2021 for what is important to us. It's made of 1 directive and 2 regulation. So, no... okay, this slide is basically a plan of what's going to happen. I'm going to go into detail. So it's just to explain. I'm going to talk about what you see here, so what the Council directive is proposing, and what regulation are also coming up with. So to start with, the first thing important in my positive outlight at the future of VAT is that in order to make sure, or at least to encourage e-seller, so the seller from online commerce, to encourage them to comply with VAT, there is the mini one-stop shop. I don't know if you're already aware of it. Do you know the mini one-stop shop? No? Well, the mini one-stop shop exists now since 2015. It's an electronic system that is made available for e-service suppliers, so the services that are rendered on the internet. It basically means that if you render a service to a consumer somewhere in Europe, you are, according to VAT rules, supposed to add to your invoice the VAT of the member state where your consumer is established. So I'm a Belgian seller, I have a customer in France, I am expected to put French VAT on my invoice. With the mini one-stop shop, the MOS, I don't need to register in France in order to apply French VAT on my invoice. I can stay registered in Belgium, add French VAT on my invoice, collect French VAT, give the French VAT to the Belgian state, and then it's up to the Belgian state to manage the VAT with the French state. So that's what is already existing. And the idea, it's going to be implemented in 2021, is that the mini one-stop shop will grow and will become a full adult one-stop shop. Basically, instead of being limited to electronic services, the mini one-stop shop will become applicable to goods and to the rest of the service. It will also be available to non-EU suppliers. So if you have a good that enter Europe from, let's say, India or the US, it will be possible for the seller to register in one member state only, and then to sell the good with the VAT of the member state where his consumer is established, without registering in each of the 28, 27 member states, in order to comply with the VAT rules. So it's a simplification measure, if you want, in order to avoid for businesses to have to pay the compliance, and to engage into the different language issue and everything. you say, you know what, you just go to one member state, you do your compliance there, and from there, you are entitled to collect the VAT of all the other member states. You remit it to the one member state where you are registered, and then it's up to the state to arrange between themselves the, the computation of VAT. So that's basically what's going to happen with the mini one-stop shop turning into the one-stop shop. Just one tiny thing I didn't mention is that for goods entering the EU from outside Europe, there will be a little bit of a limitation. It's not going to be all the goods. It's going to be the goods that the value is below 150 euros. So for those goods, it will be possible to use the one-stop shop system. For the others, it will be different. You will still need to go by the normal system. Another measure that will be implemented in order to solve the issue that the e-commerce is currently facing, and that was, if we go back to my first slide where I was saying the issue costs too much for the businesses. So we do the one-stop shop to make it cost less. Second issue, it was the level playing field, which is not met at the moment. Well, here we're coming there. Richard already touched upon it. You mentioned the low-value consignment relief. Basically, at the moment, when a good enters Europe from outside Europe, if it's below 22 euro, there is an exemption. We say, hey, it's fine, 20 euros, we don't care that much. I mean, it would cost more in order to do the custom declaration and the VAT declaration and pay it on. So we just exempt it, and that's good. It sounds nice on the paper, but reality has shown that this 22 euros is kind of understood pretty largely by businesses that then say, hey, you know what, an iPhone, yeah, it's 22 euros. So basically a lot of expensive goods have entered into Europe being undervalued on the custom declaration in order not to pay VAT. So there are two things based on that. The first thing is, well, there is a lot of VAT lacking in the treasury of each member state because of that. But there is also the thing that when a customer receives a good, at some point the good is being stopped at the customer and say, well, we're going to check it, random check. And they say, oh, you have to pay VAT. So apparently a lot of goods have been refused by customers in Europe because they had to pay surprised VAT. So they didn't know they would have to pay it, then they discovered they have to pay it, so they don't want it. So it costs a lot of money for the businesses and for the state. So the idea has been, okay, now we have technical way to do it, and we are able to take care of those imports in Europe. Yeah, we're able to make sure VAT is paid on it, and that it's still worthwhile, if I can say it like that. So it's going to cost more, of course, in order to make sure the VAT is correctly paid and it's going where it should be. But we're able to do it. So let's get rid of that exemption. So the low-value consignment relief is not going to be applicable anymore, meaning all the goods, even below 22 euros, will have to bear VAT when they enter Europe. And then after all those carrots in order to say, oh, please come here, good non-EU supplier, and pay the good VAT, there is also the stick. And well, I'm not going to be talking too much because Richard explained a lot about it already. I'm just going to mention, okay, so the stick will be that platform which represents, I think it's 70 to 75% of online sale nowadays. So it's a big amount, while the platform will be made liable for the VAT. So if VAT is not paid, it will be possible for the state to go after the platform saying, well, your responsibility, you are the dim seller, even though you say it's not you. Yeah, as we said, you say it's your how did you call it? The people drinking in the bar. Yeah, so even though someone from your bar is selling the beer and not you, well, it's going to be the responsibility of the barman, no matter what, to pay the VAT if the one which is working in his bar to sell the beer is not paying the VAT. So that's the stick aspect of the reform in order to ensure the right collection of VAT. And well, that's it about the implementation of VAT to make sure, at least to hope it's going to work better. I think it's quite positive, and we should not be too sad or too scared about the future. I think it's going the right way, and we should collect more VAT and ensure a much better level playing field in the future.
And now we will have the time for all your questions. And question to you, who wants to start? Somebody else. Okay, Leon. Maybe very briefly you say who you are, yeah?
I'm Leo Mullenberg. I'm a representative of e-commerce Europe. I'm the one representing this evil mad web shops. You put them in, and I like to make not a question, but a remark on how you see an online marketplace, and or better said, an online platform. Because an online platform can have several characters. It can be an intermediary service, it can be a search online service, it can be a marketplace, but it also can be a shopping mall. And the only difference is that they are online and that they're digital. But a shopping mall is really the same online as it is offline. And so you have to take into account that most of the platforms are not sellers themselves. They only are facilitating the sale of goods between consumers and traders on the platforms. Either being on a marketplace, like we have a traditional marketplace where everybody can sell what he wants, or having their shop on a platform as like it is as in a shopping mall. And mostly the relation consumers have with the online platform is a platform service relation and a platform service contract. So mostly the platform is not the seller at all. And you always say the platform is the seller. The platform is only providing for, let me say, the environment for traders to come in contact with consumers. Consumers come in contact with the traders, and they are in such a way they are an intermediary service. They have a contract with consumers under intermediary services. They have a contract with the traders under intermediary service. But basically, the contract which is established, the sales contract, is between the consumer and the trader on the marketplace or on the shopping mall.
And does somebody want to react since Leon was explaining? You would like to answer, yeah. Okay, so I take the gentleman first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I'm Samuel. I work for eBay, and just wanted to echo some of the messages Leo had. I think the pub analogy was interesting, but I think not fully accurate. So I'd rather go with eBay as a shopping mall online thinking. So if you think of City Deun in Brussels downtown, it's a shopping mall where independent retailers operate their shops. Those retailers, like Fnac that operates there, of course charge, or in charge of making sure what they do is legal. So they have to sell products that are safe, products that are compliant. They have to collect VAT on their sales and remit it to government. Of course, City Deun as a shopping mall has some sort of responsibility to make sure that all of that is legal as well. So they have security guards at the doors. And if they get notified by government, for example, authorities that, hey, this retailer that rents retail space in your shopping mall is engaged in illegal activities, they can terminate the rental contract, for example. But the fundamental question is who is indeed the one who transacts with the consumer and then thereby carries a legal obligation. So I think that's important to keep in mind when you think of the role of online marketplaces. Yes, they have a role to play in many things, whether it's VAT or product safety or other concerns that are being raised, compliance with product regulation. But it's ultimately the retailers that act as independent businesses that use these technology platforms to connect with consumers that are responsible legally. Thank you.
Richard, you want to react, yeah?
Yes, I've heard this shopping mall comparison before. If I go back to my third example on there, so I would say that the second example is closer to a shopping mall example where you have lots of people trading in one place. I think where the difference is that in the second model, the shopping mall never has sight of the sales data of the shops. The shopping mall owner does not see what's sold and to who. So in that second model, that's what the owner of the shopping mall is able to see. In the third model, the shopping mall owner shopping mall owners do not take payment for the shops in their mall. Shopping mall owners do not dictate terms and conditions of sale to the shops in their mall. Shopping mall owners do not eject people from their shopping mall if the seller falls out with a customer. There's all sorts of comparisons that don't work at all in a shopping mall. And the point I was making was I think it's much more comparable to a pub, because I can see the argument that you could say, well, why should a shopping mall owner be responsible for example, the sale of illegal goods? Well, that's why they introduced the Licensing Act. They introduced the Licensing Act because landlords were not responsible. So my point would be that they should be responsible, because if they are the people that own the environment in which these things are happening, it's all very well saying I've got a contract that exempts me from this behaviour, but that's not right, because if you're the landlord of a pub and the police came in and you said, well, I have a contract that means that I'm not responsible for the behaviour of this customer, you'd get laughed all the way to jail. So I don't accept that that model is actually right.
If I could just also add, I think the suggestion that somehow the online operator is equivalent to a mall, and that that is exactly the same when you go into a bricks and mortar mall, that ignores the evidence we've just heard this afternoon, and that is from Yeva, who talked about the huge level of non-compliance, unsafe product that was available on an online mall compared to a very low or no level of non-compliance in a bricks and mortar mall, and the evidence that I presented as well, that again showed a huge level of non-compliance in the online mall and very low level in the bricks and mortar mall. They are materially different, and given the fact that, as you say, if we're transacting as a consumer through an online mall with an exporter based in Guangzhou, we need a responsible person somewhere to carry the can. That's the key issue. And it actually came across in all the presentations. It was that R word, responsible. We have to have somebody who is responsible for the compliance of those products. And absent any other organisation, any other nominated authorised representative, the only other obvious organisation is the online platform or mall.
The Licensing Act actually obligates landlords to name a responsible person. It doesn't have to be the landlord, but they have an obligation to name a responsible person. And I think what's missing here is that these platforms should be made to at least name a responsible entity if it's not them that has to deal with it.
Thank you all for this first set of questions. A very brief reaction, Leon, because you will speak later.
We see at the moment that we have a proposal for a platform to business regulation, and a lot of these questions are addressed in this platform to business regulation. We also see in the New Deal for Consumers a new regulation proposed for platforms in informing the consumer who they are dealing with, and if they are dealing with the platform itself as a seller, it should also be obvious, it should be more transparent, and so on. And I think you should take into account that serious business even on platforms are trying to be compliant, and it's especially the rough traders, and what we see especially in my business in the e-commerce, there's especially traders from outside the European Union are not complying with the rules. And that's a bigger problem. And I think for that issue, for people coming from outside the EU, there should be some kind of regulation, reasonable regulation, to make platforms liable if they know that a trader on their platform is not acting compliant. But then we have a problem. Then your comparison with the pub goes a bit wrong, because in the pub owner has an overview of everybody who is in his premises. That's very easy. But on a platform, there are 1,000 traders trading even billions of products, and so it is hard for a platform to control at the entrance. Let me say, when the traders come in at a platform, whether they are compliant or not. And we see at the moment already that most of the platforms take their responsibility when afterwards is reported that traders on their platforms are not acting compliant, that they they take the measures they take for reasonable. So there is already a let me say a development on platforms taking their responsibility.
Okay, I will say Lionel Brunet from Syndicat de l'Éclairage, a French trade organization for lighting. I think there is only one legal word to remember, concealment, which is recel in French. You know, it has been the way the antiques were conducted, and in fact the responsibility of the platform, whatever the form are, is the concealment. So they cannot ignore, they can ignore the facts, they can ignore the figures you have shown, and it's a big threat for level playing field. And we mentioned 5 billion of euro. I have heard of far bigger figure of 150 billion of euro for VAT evasion. So we can say that there are solutions, there are experts in database. I don't see where is the problem to solve when we see that we are facing to have database for labeling, database for any kind of process provided by European Commission. I guess the European Commission has a solution. If the platform has no solution, I ask the Commission to find solution because they are very keen on the database process now.
Thank you, Lionel. We have another question on that side.
Sorry, so my name is Romain Le Teneur from WeLogic. We are a European hub for compliance in battery and packaging. So it's not really a question, it's more a remark. First of all, as a hub representing some schemes and producers in Europe who are trying to comply, somehow it's not our role to decide who has to comply. That's first comment as a service provider. What we are experiencing currently is that some marketplaces, I cannot name them, do require their, I'm talking about the marketplaces where they offer their marketplace to other companies that want to sell their devices. Some of the marketplaces are requiring some proof of compliance to their, I would say, business partners. But what we experience as a service provider in Europe is a lack of harmonization, notably regarding the WE topic, the battery topic, and the packaging topic. And to make it brief, some of the, I would say, business or companies who are trying to comply, and I'm talking here about Chinese companies, sometimes they face huge difficulties because we are experienced that one company can contract for WE compliance in one country and cannot contract for battery compliance in one country or packaging compliance. So at the end of the day, what some of the speakers said today is that some VAT, I would say, discussions are ongoing for at least these platforms. We observe also that some EPR reviews are ongoing with the WE battery or packaging issues, and I would say that for business players, it's really not easy to handle all these different topics in the same way when it talks about administrative talks and compliance management. So who has to organize the compliance is one point, but then the rules have to be clear and easy to handle, otherwise it's a mess for everybody on the market.
Just to comment on that.
Do you want somebody to react?
I was going to say that's why you need an authorised representative, a responsible person. A responsible person can undertake that process.
Okay, we have a question at the back. We have a lady here who is going to talk now, and she was asking the floor for some time.
Okay, thanks. But I didn't want to disturb. The main conversation was here. My name is Natalia Sierra. I'm from We Take Back System in Spain. And my question is for Liba Bardanayan. Sorry if I didn't say it properly, your surname, because it's a very, I would say, practical exercise that you have done here. When you find all those non-compliant products or lighting products, especially that mega shock that you find, especially in marketplaces, I won't say any name. What was the reaction of the administration? What was the tool the administration used, at least to get to these marketplaces and say, okay, guys, I have these. What should we do now? Because that links very, very much with the responsible person in the country in order to say, okay, you cannot sell this product. How did you manage?
Well, that's what we're trying to do. That particular product has been bought on online retailer, and so when we identify the issue, you know, we contacted, first of all, we straight away contacted the trading standards and saying this poses the danger. We have tried to contact the online retailer to say you are selling the non-compliant product. It took me about 9 months to get the response from that online retailer, and his response was rapid. We're going to take out the product of the market. And, well, okay, fair enough. You can take off 5 products that we identified. What about the rest? And that's that mystery, the cloud, where no one knows the answer. Well, okay, we took off 5 products. How about that over 1 million products that they're probably non-compliant in some areas? And there is no one responsible. Amazon can only take off the product of the market. eBay can take off the product of the market if we address and say these are the problems. But at the moment, it's pretty much that's it. So we're also trying to work, with this one of the online retailers to say, look, we as LA, so I'm talking for the LA now, not the other association, but we want them to get involved with us. We say, look, we can give you training. We want to work with you. We want to promote the compliance. So that's something we're working, and probably the main aim of the project to say, taking off the product of the market is not enough. We want you to get involved and be responsible, not necessarily take responsibility. This product is non-compliant, so you are faulted for that. But for that, the pub owner to know the regulations, know the requirements, and if they're being fined for non-compliant products, that they could address with the supplier who's supplying the non-compliance, and they would take, the action. So, yes, it's a hard work, but hopefully we can achieve something. I hope that answers your question.
Hello. My name is Klaus. I'm a lawyer from the Danish Producers' Responsibility. We think about free riders a lot in Denmark. And we think about what should we do? Can we do it in once or can we do it in parts? We consider to do it in parts, to take away some of the market. But how we do that? When I was a young man, somebody told me that all the food I was putting in my mouth was not very good. They gave me information about the food that I put in myself was not very good, and suddenly there was a market for better food. Food that made us older. Food that was more healthy. We think information to the consumer is the way ahead, because these guys, free riders, are non-commercial. They will always be 2 steps ahead. They will always be. They're clever because it's money. So why don't? Thank you.
Okay. Some questions. Further questions? Anyone? Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe just quickly. No. Go first.
Hi, Jamie Patel with LVMH. Maybe just a quick comment on this whole shopping mall analogy. I find it a little bit incredible for some of these online actors to turn around and say, you know what, we're too big to be responsible. There's too many sellers on our platform. We can't monitor them all. But we've built a platform that can accept them all, but we can't monitor them. Right? You wouldn't accept that kind of attitude from any large company. You wouldn't say, you know, if Shell said, sorry, there's too many gas stations for us to look at one more time, you know, in one go, that wouldn't be acceptable. Anyway, that's just a comment. We're looking at the issue of counterfeit online. The problems are exactly the same, the lack of responsibility, the lack of responsiveness even. But from your point of view of compliance, specifically with we and then with tax, what practical steps could you see online retailers and online intermediaries of various kinds taking to actually address the issue of being more responsible? I think that the comment you made was very apropos. More responsible rather than necessarily being liable for the products that they're offering to European consumers.
So the question is asked to our panel of speakers. Yeah.
I can answer that. It's interesting you've raised a point that I've discussed with somebody else. I think the problem is that if there is no actual rule that everybody has to follow, the behaviours vary. Without naming platforms, some of them have this view that they're part of the online community and they have some kind of ethical perspective on it. Others, we don't have to do that because we're not obligated to. Going back to the money point, you know, at the end of the day, if you can make money out of it and you have no reason to not do it, you don't have to do it. So I think that I think it's unavoidable that these are basically legislated in some kind of responsibility is legislated in some way, because going back to my analogy again, don't keep revisiting it, but if you look at the history of the Licensing Act, before they introduced those rules, there were literally drunken riots in the street. You know? Until they introduced those rules, public houses were not controlled. So that's really...
I think it's really important that organisations are made legally responsible, because I think until it's a legal requirement, anything else is still an unlevel playing field, because the companies based in Europe have to comply without a choice. So to have legal compliance versus we'll do our best to comply isn't really acceptable to me. That's not a way forward. I just wanted to jump back to the comment gentleman earlier about consumer information being the most important thing. That's not the case at all. Sorry, consumers are not individuals who understand the detail of electrical safety in the way that Yeva does, packaging compliance in the way that you do, VAT, and other things. Sorry, they go online and they hope to expect to buy products that comply, and it's the duty of member states and enforcement bodies to do to try to oversee that and make sure they comply. Consumer information is helpful, but that does not in any way exempt producers from their obligations.
Any more questions or reactions? Yes, madam.
Yes, hello. Yasmin Batista, GG Connect e-commerce and platforms. Indeed, I wanted to pick up on a few of these comments made, and I found interesting the aspect you were mentioning about enforcement, really, of the rules. A gentleman here in the public already said that, so there's a lot of things that are in the development already, apart from the P2B that we have been we're responsible for, or the geo-blocking rules and many others that are in the making, especially on the liability also of platforms. There's a lot of discussion going on with them, apart from now the proposal on the terrorist side of it, and so the cooperation and the takedown that needs to be done there. But I think there's a lot of, you see a lot of voluntary MOUs with undertakings that are participating to try to help out in identifying content which is illegal or there are problems because there is some sort of other problem with the product, the safety of the product incurred. So I think we have touched on various aspects. On the one hand, there is indeed a lot of response from the EU to try in the digital single market to address some of these concerns, but of course in a balanced way, leaving the freedom for the platforms to operate and do the job that they are doing, that is helping out a lot of small businesses as well to exist and to go across borders. So the good elements about that. But indeed, there's the enforcement problem is also, I see it as a challenge. So I would be interested to hear what you think could be done on that. I mean, the geo-blocking regulation is entering into force on the 3rd of December, so we're doing a lot of awareness there and trying to foresee all we can do there as to sweeps or checks that really the rules are really complied with, and how we can get across the information to all the traders that are operating on these marketplaces. So what's your take on how we can, on the basis of all these efforts that are done, how can we ensure that indeed this doesn't stay lettera morta but is executed in a good way? Thanks.
I think to me it still comes down to responsibility, and having an individual and an organisation somewhere within the EU that does take responsibility for the compliance of those products being sold. And without that, we have no way of practically and realistically enforcing providing information about where the product came from or which company in Guangzhou made it does not help. It doesn't solve the problem. Information is interesting. It's responsibility that allows enforcement bodies to take action. So having an individual or an organisation within the jurisdiction of the EU who can be held to account by the EU, I think to me is the way forward to solve many of the problems we've been discussing today.
I don't think that's a negative thing either, because if you introduce that, I think it ups everyone's game. Because at the moment, you've got lots of products being sold that are substandard or illegal or dangerous. That all gets removed, and they presumably all get replaced with ones that are actually better quality, that aren't dangerous. That are, So I think it's good all round if that's done. And I was curious to know, has anyone actually been hurt, or is there any information on people that have actually suffered any injury from these products?
As I spoke earlier with Nigel, if I had a time to address all the calls and inquiries made, then we would have a significant number of, not necessarily someone hurt that it's hurt proper, but recently I had a call from the lady saying she bought the lights, she connected them all together, plugged into a computer to control them, and it's just all blasted in fires and shut the computer down. So we are aware of these, but as I said, there's so little we can do. We can report to the trading standards, that's why I advised the lady. I said, please report to trading standards. Let me know the follow-up if I can help you, advise you, any sort of support. It's the same with our 5 products. Also, I didn't mention in my presentation some of the products. Amazon sells, I'm picking on Amazon, so I'm sorry I'm picking that particular, so I'm not, picking on them. But they're in a question. Anyway, so the Amazon sells the products worldwide. So one of those lights that we bought, so they were selling for EU market, and they had that E26 lamp holder, and was market for European market. They were like, it's E27, you can fit E27 light bulb, it all meets the European standards. It did say in description. The same product is also sold in America with the black and white wires, which is very much like American standard. And, it is not illegal to sell the product in EU with black and white wires, with E26, lamp holder, but instructions need clearly state that. There was no instructions provided with the product. And back again, it is the retailer responsibility. So you putting the product on the market, do you have instructions? Tick. Do you have declaration of conformity? Tick. Do you actually have something to support declaration of conformity? Tick. Put the product in the market. At the moment, there's no control. So
I have a proposal to make to you. Is to go to coffee break, continue the discussion, and come back at 3:40, 5 minutes later than planning. I want to reassure you there will be a longer question and answer session at the end of the workshop. Thank you all. And the coffee break is at the end on the left side.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having the opportunity to have a presentation here. I restricted my presentation on unsafe products and product liability for unsafe products, but we also could say something about WEEE, about VAT, and so that's all where we are involved as an e-commerce association, and as all let me say. Compliant traders or traders that try to be compliant, we think it's a shame that we have a competitive disadvantage by all these rough traders not being compliant. So for us, the VAT problem from non-EU and even EU companies and not paying the VAT is for us the same problem as for the brick and mortar shops. So we are on the same line. What is that concerned? To give a brief introduction, we are representing about 75,000 e-commerce traders, large traders and small traders. 80% of our members is small and medium enterprises. 20% are the larger enterprises. We also represent platforms as well as traders acting on the platform. So we try to have a balanced position between the interests of, on the one hand, the platforms, and on the other hand, the traders acting on it. We are representing 20 national e-commerce associations, and we try to be the voice of e-commerce Europe. When we talk about product safety and liability for unsafe products, in general, we have two kind of legislation. First, we have the product safety legislation. That's mainly on supervising, on preventing unsafe problems coming on the market, and having, if they are on the market, having them as soon as possible removed from the market. It's mostly by supervising authorities, and the general norm is that producers and distributors are not allowed to bring unsafe products on the market. And it's accompanied by an alert system, RAPEX, maybe you know it. If you don't know it, take a look at it. It's very interesting. There's a weekly report on unsafe products which are seen as unsafe products. On the other hand, you have product liability legislation that is giving a redress possibility for consumers to have their harms or losses compensated by the one having an unsafe product brought on the market. Imagine that you have a bulb which implodes, which is non-compliant on the safety rules, and which it explodes in your face. So you want to have compensation for the harm, for the losses you have as well in a personal sphere as in a private sphere, as in a material sphere. It's mainly directed on redress for consumers and other individuals in case of harm or losses caused by unsafe products. And it is, on the one hand, on contractual liability, because even if you didn't agree on it, especially, most contracts are up to be containing also the obligation to only deliver safe products. And so if you don't deliver a safe product, it's generally seen as a breach of contract, as a breach of the sales contract. But also, if there isn't any contract, because there's no sales relation, for instance, there's also a tort liability. A producer which brings a product on the market that is unsafe can be liability in tort without a contractual liability for this unsafe product, for harm caused by this unsafe product. Because not only everybody who is harmed by an unsafe product has a contractual relation with the seller. And imagine this bulb exploding in your kitchen and exploding in the face of your kid, who didn't sell the bulb itself, but you bought the bulb, and the kid is the victim. So the kid doesn't have a contractual having a relation with the producer or the seller. So then you only can rely on liability in tort. and it goes mostly on personal injury and that versus material losses. And we will see, I will explain, we have a system, a very, let me say, developed system in Europe to cope with this system. We also can talk about collective redress in case of mass harm. We now have a proposal for collective redress momentarily from the Commission. And it's thought about, but we think there should be somewhere a collective redress mechanism in case of mass harm caused by defective products or by unsafe products. When we talk about cross-border, when we talk about online sales of unsafe products, online is borderless. So it's basically it's global, and it's global, and we see that more and more trade is conducted over platforms, because platforms have a lot of traffic, and if you step in as a small business or even as a brick and mortar shop in a platform, you profit from the really huge traffic which is on the platform already, and that makes your sales opportunities improve. We have producers, we have distributors, we have importers, we have sellers, and on the other hand we have consumers. So it's a whole chain of actors acting in this online world, providing the products at the end from the producer to the consumer. And when we talk about cross-border online sales, we have to talk about private international law. And in Europe, private international law is regulated in Brussels I on jurisdiction and execution, and the Rome I Convention on applicable law. I will come back on that. So it's rather technical, but I'm a lawyer, so don't expect any more. When we look to the product safety legislation in Europe, we see generally we have a horizontal directive, which is the general directive on general product safety, and we have vertical directives which are on certain segments of the market and regulating product safety for instance, safety of toys, electrical equipment, on the making available or market electrical equipment, or personal protective equipment, and so on and so on and so on. We have more than this. I only took out some of the most important directives. They are directives, so that means that national member states can go further in having rules protecting the consumer more than is foreseen by the directive. That's what we call gold plating. Member states are allowed to have extra rules giving more protection to consumers. That makes it a bit difficult, like Trina said already. We like as web shops, we like a common market with only one set of rules and applicable in all member states in the same way. It makes it easier for everybody, makes it easier to understand for consumers, and makes it also easier to understand for traders, especially small and medium enterprises, which are mostly not having a lawyer in their employees. The basic rules for this product safety directive says a duty on manufacturers to ensure that products placed on the market are safe and do not pose a risk to the health or safety of consumers. For instance, we have the CE mark, and the CE mark on product is an indication that the product meets the essential safety requirements of the relevant vertical directives. But it is the producer itself who puts the CE mark on the product. The CE mark should only be applied to products covered by the vertical directives. So products covered by the general horizontal directive cannot be marked by a CE mark. And then we have the rapid alert system for non-food products. And maybe to give you an idea, because some people gave some figures. When we look to the last year, and then I have to take my spectacles. There were about, and it's about 28. There's 28 EU member states participating in this alert system, plus Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway. They are all cooperating in this system, and if a national supervisor finds out that a product is unsafe, it notifies it to the Commission, and the Commission notifies it to the other countries, and notifies it also to retailers and to producers. Take a look at it. I looked at it for this week. It's a weekly report, and you see, for instance, it starts with some children bikinis having some roads on the back which they can be strangled in, and so on, and cars having defects which make them unsafe. It's really nice to look at it. So if you want to have a discussion every week on products, look at it and do what you think is best. Because it also is addressed on producers and retailers to give them a chance to know which products are seen as unsafe, so that they can withdraw them either from the market or have a recall action. For instance, in mostly with cars, there's a recall action, and the producer is asked to repair the defect. If we look to the figures, if we look to 2017, there were more than 2,000 alerts, and it's when we look to it, it's about 29%. It's on toys, 20% is on motor vehicles, and on clothing and textile, it's about 12%. When we look to the harm they may cause, its injury is about 28%. And I think a chemical risk is about 22%, and you have to think about products which have contain too much cadmium or something like that, and which is dangerous for your health if you are contacting or opposed to this products. The majority of risk products come from outside the EU, so it's more than 50% coming from outside the EU. And when we look to it, it's Chinese products in 2017 were 53%, about 1,155. And when we look to the European origin, it was about 26%, and it was about 430 notifications. So it's not only coming from outside the EU, there are also competitors inside the EU who place dangerous products on the market. And a final number is from this 2,200 alerts prompted, nearly 4,000 have been followed up by an action either by retailers or by the producers. And mostly the action is either directed to the retailer to withdraw the product from the market, or to the producer to provide for a recall and to provide for recall for repair for the defective. That's on product safety prevention. And when we talk to individual consumers being victim of a defective products, we have a line of directives which can be applicable. First, of course, the 85 directive on liability for defective products, which basically says that the producer or the importer within the EU, or the supplier, if they cannot be identified, is liable for harm and losses caused by personal injury or death. And there is a split liability for the seller and the producer for material losses in the private sphere. Up to 500 euros, the liability is for material damages in the private sphere, is for the retailer, is for the seller, and above this amount, the liability is for the producer. Or whoever is seen as producer. For instance, you're also seen as a producer when you put your own brand on a certain product. And then we have another directive. It's a directive on consumer sales and guarantee.
Can you conclude? Can you conclude soon?
Well,
just to conclude soon.
Yeah.
Sure. Take it.
Okay, this is what we see. But now we come to the problem. Because safety on products sold online, we see that online shopping is getting more and more, and we also see that shopping over a platform is increasing very much. And that was the reason for the commission to issue a notice on market surveillance on products sold online, and to help national supervisors to come to let me say, a common approach and how to deal with it, and how to see whether it's placed on the market or not, and give guidelines on. And the main thing is that in this guidelines is that products offered for sale online to consumers and other end users on the Union market by manufacturer, importer, distributor, or producers established in the EU are considered to be placed on the union market. But the same accounts for products offered by producers, manufacturers, importers, and so on, established outside the EU, that direct their activities that target consumers within the European Union. Okay. There's a self-regulation going on online sales. On the 25th of June of this year, several online marketplaces, four to be exact, eBay, Amazon, Rakuten France, and Alibaba, which are some of the main biggest platforms, they voluntarily signed a product safety pledge. And in this initiative sets out specific actions and obligations for the platforms in the field of unsafe products. There is a whole list. I guess you get these slides
Yes.
afterwards,
Yep,
so
they will
I
be
don't
shared.
say them now. But it makes them easy cooperate with supervisors and having them looked at the RAPEX system at regular times, so they can comply with or they can provide for action when this when unsafe products are placed on the market. And then I come to the problem for consumers. So I think the general supervising system is working quite well, because it's also looking on products from traders coming from outside the EU. But when we look to the consumer redress, the individual consumer redress, as long as it is in Europe, provided by European traders or European producers settled in Europe, we have a very decent system. First, you have to go to the court. You have to find out which court you have to go, and consumers are very well protected, because if they are targeted from another country, they always can go to their own courts, the court in their own country, and it's up to them whether they also go whether they go to the court of the trader in another country. And on the other hand, proceedings brought against the consumer by the trader. What? Okay, sorry. Okay, I do my best. But proceedings brought against a consumer by a trader, they always must be brought before the courts of the country of settlement of the consumer. That's very convenient for consumers, so they always have a court where they can go to. But now comes the problem. It's only directed to traders and producers which are settled, which have their domicile within the EU. So when there is a trader coming from outside the EU, Brussels I doesn't provide for any solutions. Then you have to look to the national private international law system of your country where you're seated as a consumer, where to know which laws will apply and which judges will be I think it will be in charge. So there's, in my vision, there's a problem, because most of the de facto problems are coming up from outside the EU, and we think that the regulation needs to be adapted to cope with this problem. That also traders targeting consumers from outside the EU in the EU should be subject to the rules of Brussels I. That's it. Thank you very much.
Leon, sorry. Sorry to push you. Thank you for the overview on the product safety aspects. Now, after having heard the views from the e-commerce sector, it's time to dig a little bit on policy tools that they are. And one of the developments that exist currently at the EU level is linked to market surveillance and the so-called goods package. And for that, we have asked the most relevant expert on the matter, who is behind the proposal for the goods package at the European Commission, and who leads the unit responsible for that on single market policy, mutual recognition and surveillance at DG Grow, Mr. Hans Engels. Mr. Engels, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Now I'm really stressed because you call me the most relevant expert. I'm certainly not the most relevant expert, though. I know something about it, but I'm not certainly not the person who knows the most. So my unit is responsible for market surveillance, CE marking, product liability, and a few other things. And what we've done also recently is the goods package, for which I got 45 minutes, if I understood correctly, to make my presentation, which is a bit short, but I'll try to do it in 45 minutes. That was a joke. But I'll try to do it in 15 minutes. I've got a long story to tell, but I'll try to cover it in 15 minutes. So, last year we adopted the goods package. Adopted means that we made 2 legislative proposals plus a few other things which are very fascinating reading for experts, reports. But my story today is about the second proposal, is the legislative proposal on compliance with enforcement of union harmonization legislation, which covers about 70 EU legislative acts. It's not only about product safety, but it's also about environmental legislation and other consumer legislation. Because the evaluation that we did confirms what was being said, is being said, and will be said during this workshop. There are too many non-compliant products on the European market. So, why are there so many non-compliant products on the European market? There's several reasons for it. First of all, there are resource constraints for market surveillance authorities. They are understaffed. They suffered a lot from the financial crisis. So market surveillance at the moment in Europe is not optimal. It's not optimal. It's not their fault because they're being cut in human and financial resources, but it's a reality that at the moment market surveillance authorities are a bit understaffed. It's also a fact that at the moment there's hardly any deterrence for the enforcement tools. There are a bit of penalties, your product can be taken off the market, but in general we do have an enforcement problem because there's low deterrence, especially also for businesses established outside the EU. Because our main challenge, and the challenge for all of us, is that it's fairly easy to enforce European legislation in the EU, but outside the EU it's extremely complicated. And this is a challenge that we're all having. There's also a problem of fragmentation of our organization because market surveillance authorities are national, sometimes regional, and in one specific member states even local. They don't talk to each other, they don't cooperate, and they mainly only care about their local markets. But there's also a problem for businesses because you're all experts and you know that we are not exactly suffering from a lack of rules in the single market for products. There are many rules, and there are also a number of businesses, time to time, fail to understand that some directives or regulations might apply to them. And so we also have the challenge of e-commerce. E-commerce is an opportunity, and there we have to be fair. It's an opportunity for all European businesses. It is the future. So what is important for us is also we wouldn't distinguish between online and offline. It's one of the ways to sell products. So our focus of the proposal on enforcement and compliance was first of all to promote compliance and to help businesses comply. We had foreseen in our proposal several instruments to help businesses to provide information so that businesses could also have a source of information about possible issues of compliance. We will also have fit for purpose for new online supply chain, online sales supply chains and cooperation between authorities. And we were a bit inspired by the good practices in several member states. Now, first element is the promotion of compliance, where we had foreseen free information from national product contact points, compliance partnership arrangements, and memoranda of understanding, which were not exactly, to put it mildly, welcomed by the Council. Most of it was either deleted or shortened by the Council. We still have to discuss it, and this will be my last slide. We still have to discuss it with European Parliament, but that part was fairly cut back by the Council because a number of people believe that it's not the role of market surveillance authorities to help businesses. Their role is to control products And they also believe that businesses should be, if they're professionals, they should have their own sources of information about the applicable law. But this will still have to be discussed with the European Parliament too. Now there's a challenge of market surveillance of online sales, and especially the low-value consignments. Because low-value consignments, especially coming from third countries, are a bit of an issue. Here you see the growth in small consignments arriving from outside the EU, and you see the steady increase. Which means that we do have a challenge here for, especially for market surveillance, because market surveillance at the moment is mainly addressed to brick and mortar and the traditional supply chain. It's difficult to do market surveillance on smaller parcels or individual parcels, because we do not want, we are all consumers, we do not want that all our parcels are being opened by an authority. We also believe that online and the advantage of online is a very fast delivery. But nonetheless, we do have a bit of a problem in terms of enforcement, because it is not always easy for market surveillance authorities to control this, especially low-value consignments, which consignments either below 22 euros or in the range between 22 euros and 150 euros. There was a loophole. We have to be fair, there was a loophole. And it was a bit of an unfair, an unequal treatment of businesses established outside the EU and businesses established in the EU. So what we wanted to do, first of all, is to cover the fulfillment centers, which some of them argue that they're not covered by EU legislation and that they're not more or less doing logistics. To include them in the proposal so that they would also be part of the market surveillance, but that they could also benefit from the compliance instruments that were mentioned in one of the previous slides. And also to strengthen the controls at the external borders. So what we had foreseen, first of all, is the person in the EU responsible for compliance information. I've heard that there was already in the previous session, which unfortunately I missed, was a bit of a discussion on it. This person for compliance information was actually inspired by our colleague for VAT. You may recall from one of the previous presentations is that there's a new VAT directive, 2017-2455, if I'm not mistaken, provides for an intermediary for VAT, a special arrangement for low-value consignments coming from third countries. So we were very inspired by that and say there should be a person in the EU responsible for compliance information. That person should be the main contact for market surveillance authorities, because we think that that person can give very valuable information also to market surveillance authorities. It's a bit of an authorized representative. That person would be the contact and could address any problems with market surveillance authorities. But we also believe that that person, which should be appointed by the manufacturer, I want to underline by the manufacturer, that person could also provide some feedback to manufacturers established outside the EU. Because this is what people very often underestimate. If there's a manufacturer established in outside the EU, that manufacturer sometimes doesn't get, or very often doesn't get any feedback at all about actions taken by market surveillance authorities. And we do believe that it's in the benefit also of manufacturers outside the EU that if they decide that their product is to be sold in the EU, that there is a contact point so that they can get the feedback about any possible issues of non-compliance in the supply chain, by market surveillance authorities or by any other, that person could also provide that feedback as a more contact person. We're not saying that this person should be responsible for compliance, it's compliance information. So this was the logic behind it, and I will not hide you that this is quite controversial, because some people are opposed to it. I see some nodding. Some people are opposed to it. Some people are in favor of it. I see also some nodding. So this is still needs to be discussed also with Council and Parliament. It's not a miracle solution. I'll be very honest, no? Because it is very important also that as a supplier you declare things correctly. And so if you can take whichever measure, if things are not declared correctly for VAT purposes, for customs purposes, and so on, it can never be correctly enforced. Now, what we also had foreseen is extra powers for authorities also for online surveillance. There, the European Parliament has made an amendment to strengthen it a bit and to oblige market surveillance authorities to do specific online verification or verification of online sales. Also, powers to be extended to fulfillment houses, so that there is no discussion about market surveillance authorities that could take measures vis-à-vis fulfillment centers. And specific power to remove online offers for products with serious risks. And also we had provided for cooperation and coordination tools. For example, mutual assistance mechanism between member states. At the moment, market surveillance is quite national. It's very national or it's regional. Cooperation between market surveillance authorities at the moment is not optimal, to put it mildly. Especially when there's a cross-border transaction taking place. We will also try to improve the structural exchange of intelligence for customs controls, because there you see the two worlds at the moment in many member states. You've got the world of customs and you've got the world of market surveillance. In certain member states, customs and market surveillance are one single administrative authority, but when they're split, you see that there's still problems of cooperation between the two sides for customs, because the role of customs is in the first place to levy customs duties and sometimes also to verify for narcotics, drugs, arms and so on. And product safety is quite often not their main priority for customs authorities. So we would like there also to have a better system to inform customs authorities and to get feedback from customs authorities. And one of the important measures is also, rather than obliging market surveillance authorities to merge or so, we've provide for the EU compliance network where we try to put them together and to ensure and to improve administrative cooperation between the several hundreds of market surveillance authorities in Europe. Now, the state of play of the negotiations and the next steps. So IMCO has voted its ambitious report in September. So as far as the European Parliament is concerned, the line is very clear. It maintains the person responsible for compliance information. It is now, according to the European Parliament, it should be the reference person. There's also a strengthening of specific powers for market surveillance authorities online in the report, and several other items are in the European Parliament report. I must underline, it's a very ambitious report, and overall we support it very much. Discussions in the Council are still ongoing. Because in the Council there the positions are diverged a lot on certain specific items, but specifically on the person responsible for compliance information. So there will be Council working parties still next week, and we nevertheless hope that we will be in a position to have this regulation adopted before the elections, and so that will enter into force, I hope, in 2021. 50 minutes. I managed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engels, for your very clear presentation. Another aspect that we mentioned in the first session was the absence of, or lack of, compliance for environmental requirements. As to this, we have invited an expert from the European Commission who is in charge of waste management and secondary material, Mrs. Bettina Lorz. And Bettina will guide us to some legislative aspects which are very interesting for all the environmental sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And well, I will do my best also to not be too long, because I understand some here certainly know already the legislation. So I have a bit modified the title, because you were strongly focusing on the platforms, and I know you do, and that is. But I'm speaking about what is in place, and so that is not all on this. So I would just point to some directives, and I will go most in detail on the WE directive, so the directive on waste from electrical and electronic equipment of relevance to you. But we also have other legislation, environmental legislation, so it's ROS, it's about hazardous substances in electronics, it's about, it's about batteries. We have packaging, of course, all these goods have to be packed when shipped. And with the increase in online sales, we have, by the way, which is also an environmental issue, just a tremendous increase in the packaging. So that is something. Now, aside from here, we also have cars. We have a directive on end-of-life vehicles, and they are also in particular for spare parts and so on. Is online sales are also becoming increasingly relevant. So we have actually two aspects under this legislation. On one hand, it's a so-called extended producer responsibility, and I've put this in bold because it's the main aspect here, which I think where there is an issue in relation to the compliance, so-called free riders is now of everything, let's say a number of actors in the online field. And we have, of course, also the aspect, but this was all what Hans in fact covered, of product compliance, because well, we have provisions on substances in these products, and mainly, and so of course it's also an issue that also under environmental law there has to be a compliance with these provisions. But for this I would want to refer actually to all what Hans has said, because they are also taken up in these 70 or so directives which are covered. So now coming more to the EPR, the Extended Producer Responsibility, and I will focus on the WE directive, but I should say that, and it will later come on to one, that the whole approach is of the same relevance to the packaging, for instance, and packaging waste directive. At present, there is no EPR obligatory for packaging and packaging waste, but member states have it in place, about all, but one, I think. And so the issues arise in the same way, but it will be obligatory also, as it is agreed now in the new waste package. So EPR means that the producer has a financial responsibility, basically, and organizational, for the collection, treatment, recovery, and disposal of waste from electronics. And, well, that's really in a nutshell. Then other provisions which I think are relevant for online sales is the provision of separate collections. So member states have to ensure that distributors are responsible for so-called one-to-one return free of charge. So when you buy a product, that you can give your old product back. And for bigger retail shops, also return of very small free of charge. Member states are to collect, are to organize the collection, and they have targets for this. And all these links also into the online sales issue. And lastly, practically, there is a register to be established by member states to monitor compliance with the provisions. And actually producers or their authorized representatives have to register in the member states where they place products on the market, and they have to report. So they have to report on the quantities and so on in order to be able to lastly establish compliance with the requirements under the directive. So now, where does the online or distance sales aspects come in? The producer is defined as any natural or legal person who, and it says irrespective of the selling technique used, including distance communication, sells electrical and electronic equipment, among other things. I mean, there are other points in the definition of producer, but it is also made clear that a producer is also the one who sells it by means of distance communication directly to private households and users other than private households in a member state, and is established in another member state or in a third country, so also from outside the EU. Distributor is any natural or legal person who makes the electrical and electronic equipment, it's difficult to read when I'm available on the market. And this does not, and the distributor can be at the same time a producer. So there is an obligation for producers supplying electrical and electronic equipment by means of distance communication to be registered, as I said before, in the member state where they sell to. And when they not, and they can also, or they can comply with this obligation by appointing an authorized representative in this member state. And conversely, the member states are to ensure that a producer that is established in one member state's territory appoints an authorized representative the moment it sells to another member state, in that member state actually. And there are also provisions on administrative cooperation and exchange of information between member states authorities responsible for the implementation in the directive. So this is just putting it all together again. So once again, the directive applies to products and producers irrespective of the selling technique, including distance and electronic selling. And the collection obligations, they also apply as far as practical, taking the same form, and they shall be in principle enforced in the same way as for other distribution channels. And this is all it, of course, in order to avoid that there are, well, the complying or the channels which are not online have to bear the costs lastly, because I say the producers have to finance all this of those who don't participate. So in relation to this directive, there are actually three groups of issues faced. On one hand, the so-called free riding that consists in not undertaking the physical take-back obligations. So, well, because you are just not there, you will not establish this one-to-one take-back. And by not paying the share of the cost of remanagement required and by not reporting. And maybe I should put this in bold because I understand this is the biggest concern. And also, free riding, of course, will contribute to underestimating the number of products placed on the market, and lastly, it will falsify the whole calculation of collection rates, which is an obligation by the member states to reach. And then you have also, and this was mentioned, of course, from the side of the online sellers, that registering in each member state where the electronic appliances are sold and to report to the national register is, of course, burdensome. There are different formats, there are different requirements, and so there is a call. Yeah, is this better? Yes, it's better. Oh, sorry. And there is a call for harmonizing this registration and reporting formats, which actually we are doing. And then is an issue from this side, of course, for the cost of appointing also an authorized representatives and above all, to know about all this, to be informed, to be aware of all it. On all these aspects, there are some examples of good practice in the member states. I will not go in detail now into this. Mainly it's on the first aspect, how the take-back is organized. I understand, and I think this is probably of particular interest here, that this whole issue of the compliance, when you can't get what is defined as a producer responsible, is much of interest here. And there maybe I should point to what seems to be in the German law, which they call a fiction of producer. So any distributor who offers electrical and or electronic equipment from not correctly registered producers is then deemed to be a producer, and so it is assuming the functions and the responsibility of the producer. I mean, this would be probably interesting to look more closely into. So, as said, on one hand we have a problem, an issue of awareness. I mean, how to make online sellers and operators, in particular based outside the EU, aware of all this. And we have an issue of enforcement. And so what I would like to mostly focus on, and I will certainly come to it, but we are not for the moment in a process of changing our legislation. We have heard about the goods package, and I think there are a number of instruments and so on which we can certainly be inspired from. But so we are focusing very much on working together. We have over the last 2 years, we had engaged with the member states, so-called compliance promotion initiative. This is on everything which has to do with the implementation of the directive. But online sales was pointed out as an issue to be further deepened. which actually we still have to do. So we have proposed also to the member states different mechanisms of peer-to-peer, so the possibility to learn from good practice in other member states. And we will go on with this in among other things, focusing particularly on online sales and the issues related to it. Then there is an initiative which is a bit, well, let's say bottom up, a network of the sanction and enforcement bodies from the member states, which was initiated by the German Environment Agency. So they are getting together. It was starting with 13 member states, maybe there are more now. I'm not sure, only started in 2017. And so the idea is indeed to cooperate in prosecution of cross-border free riders and to exchange best practice on this. And they do this actually in exchanging information, so sending, when information evidence is available about so-called free riders, so sending the report to the responsible national authority in the other member states, creating a platform for discussing the experience, and they've also provided a standardized complaint form against cross-border free riders. And so all this can be accessed. The issue is now for the platform, for the network, of course, to have more members, ideally all the EU member states, and to well, in general terms, of course, be able to continue and be more known with their activities. And we have them always in our exchanges on the directive meetings with the member states, and we would very much like to support this. We will also explore how we can link it up to other networks. So as I said before, this was very much focusing on the WE directive. We have the same issues basically in practice arising under the packaging and packaging waste directive. Maybe sometimes they're even more complicated. Now there, the EPR is obligatory, so the extended producer responsibility also at EU level. Member states have to establish these systems where they don't yet exist. And then I would like to come to the last part actually of the relevant rules and provision, and this is exactly on this EPR, so the extended producer responsibility. Yes, because one thing which is of course said, so how will the poor online sellers get their way in all these systems which are so complicated, different in every member state, where in part already operator fully integrated in the member states can't do it. And this is why we have to, with a new waste legislation which has been broadly overhauled this in the last years, and we have adopted now the new legislation this summer, we have a whole set of requirements on how these EPR systems, the extended producer responsibility, is to be organized, and in particular focusing on accountability, transparency. And I should just highlight to some provisions which are in particular relevant to online sales. So there is an obligation to establish reporting systems on how the data on products placed on the market are gathered, on the collection, treatment, and the material flows. And then I will jump a bit to ones which are also relevant, but not so much just only in this context. And I should say that in particular member states have to provide for an adequate monitoring and enforcement framework with respect to all the obligations under extended producer responsibility, the financial means and the reporting. And then in this context, member states may be more specific and lay down requirements for monitoring, such as information, registration, and reporting requirements. And there is to be a regular stakeholder dialogue on all this, on the functioning of the systems. So with all this being a bit of an insight into the different instruments which are of relevance, I should say the next steps particularly relevant on one hand under the WE directive. We will finalize a format for registration and reporting to registers, which should be at the European level, well, applied by all member state registers. So they are facilitate this and harmonize to the extent possible. I should say that we also, I mentioned before, under the compliance promotion, we have something very very down to earth. We will have continued to look into the good practice of the member states and exchange, because we hear a lot of this, and in particular also in events like today. But we would like to focus more specifically on online sales. And well, I mentioned on this EPR package, which I said before, so this is a law now. It has to be transposed, well, the whole directive by July 2020. And then member states have still some time, 54 months, to comply with it. But in the meantime, we are developing guidance, in particular, well, among other things, on issues such as cross-border cooperation and online sales. And we have just launched a study to work on this. So online sales is one particular focus, and hope we will be able to publish this guidance by the end of 2019. I have some further ideas, but I think we can probably, there will be a discussion, so I think we can go into this then.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting, and you can imagine that those considerations on the legislative framework for EucoLight and the WE sector is particularly relevant. Sorry. We have heard institutions' voice from two DGs, from Mr. Engels for DG Grow and Mrs. Lotz for DG Environment of the European Commission. Now we have invited the industry voice. So that's why Mr. Portalier, who is the expert on mutual recognition and standardization at Orgelheim, with a Pan-European Federation for the Engineering Industry, correct? Maybe it's not the logo, but it's to summarize what your association is about. We'll give the perspective on market surveillance of online sales. I guess you will tackle a little bit more the goods package, right?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, Orgelheim, for those that do not know us, represent manufacturers of electrical, electronic, mechanical, and metallic industries. Yes, that's better. Well, actually, our industries are mostly covered by union harmonization legislation that is automatic mutual recognition. And we are subject to the WE directive that has just been presented to you, and to many other product safety legislation on, well, the low voltage directive, for instance, on electrical safety, machinery directive, etc. What are we talking about? Well, a new business model which is bringing together, thanks to the internet, new customers with new and existing producers. And it provides both risk and opportunities for our industry. We do not want to kill e-commerce. It's for some of our medium-sized companies quite a blessing to have access to new selling opportunities. It's also a headache, as we heard it, for market surveillance authorities. So we need to have earth-grounded and enforceable legislation. Why authorities already today do not take action when an operator is unwilling to take action? For instance, the case of a rock trader that continues to make available a product on the market which has been flagged as non-compliant, for instance, in the REPEX system. Well, it's sad to say, but we are back to the point that was said, highlighted by Hans, is that there is no sufficient human resources and financial resources to market surveillance authorities to act. So the cost effectiveness ratio for taking action is the big issue. Most member states do very little, even if they are discovering a case of non-conformity, because the effort to bring the product in compliance, so to enter into a dialogue as it is requested by union harmonization legislation with the economic operators that is spotted as bringing this non-compliant product on the market is too time-consuming, too costly, and if it's not a serious breach or a serious case of non-compliance that could harm a large number of consumers, unfortunately, the product is often left on the market. So this is a problem. Market surveillance authority are not acting when the product is also from unknown origin and the manufacturer cannot be identified. So they give up, basically. And that's the problem. So who will pay? Because this is also an issue. The product is spotted as not compliant, sometimes dangerous. It is there. It has passed the docks of the ports of the Europe. It has been sometimes released for free circulation, and it's there. So who will pay for removing this product? And sometimes it's containers and containers of products to remove these products from the market. Who will pay for their destruction? This is the big issue. So legislation needs to be adapted to the reality, which is both enthusing and hard. To what extent checking online sales of technology product differs from the brick and mortar shop sales, as we heard? Well, in principle, it doesn't. I mean, we indeed have no difference in terms of legal aspects, contractual aspects, as it was mentioned. But we still need to differentiate between B2B sales that are done among knowledgeable professionals that know what products needs to entail to fit their needs and comply with safety legislation, for instance. And with mass marketing of low or lower added value products, B2C, such as, well, take light bulbs, for instance. Here, in B2B markets, legitimate manufacturers that have an image to protect within the EU usually do the right thing. Because they want to rapidly serve their customer in the best way, and if they are alerted that some of their product is not compliant, then usually they take action. They can be alerted by the authority and also by private initiative. I mean, Orgalim is, for instance, hosting the MSSI electrical initiative, which is gathering a number of large manufacturers of electric installation equipment, and which is doing campaigns among in the market, also including their products, to spot case of non-compliance, a bit like the study that was presented to us at the beginning of this workshop. And there were many other such private initiatives, like Athlete, that was run by the household appliance sector, to spot this kind of these products. So then, what you have results where you spot non-compliant product, you alert the various distribution channels that where these products were found, and you inform them that they have an issue. They are selling products which are not compliant. And again, when the serious ones are taking action. So customers of manufacturers of such equipment, whether they are private or public, for instance, in public procurement bids, they are putting pressure on the manufacturers to do the right thing as well. In B2C market, this is another story. Consumers have no insight on compliance requirements and no leverage on producers of these mass-marketed products that are offered to them. So we believe that the other economic operators, importers, distributors should take up their responsibilities and refrain from making available these non-compliant products on the market. It's a chain of responsibility that should involve all of us, but it's true that at the moment, at the time, sorry, when the new approach legislation or this legislation for the protection of consumers, it started with health and safety and then it went on with environment protection, etc., was designed. This legislation was indeed mostly based on the manufacturer's responsibility and still is largely. But here we are faced with a reality that we need to cope with, since market surveillance are overwhelmed. So in case of where non-compliant products would be found on online trade, it would be disproportionate to order the suspension of the whole platform, for example, through an administrative order. It has to go through the court. However, it would be acceptable to enable authority to take actions against these marketplaces, especially if they are not withdrawing the non-compliant products. So we made several suggestions to do that. Some have been taken on board by the Commission first in its proposal, and that has been reinforced in the European Parliament recently in the compliance and enforcement proposal. And I would like to react on the discussion we had earlier. Online marketplaces are facilitators of trade, but also of fraud. So we really need to consider this. Today, this cannot be ignored anymore. The complexity of new business models requires new collaborative approaches and to ensure fairness on the market. So imposing new tools like databases, it's not going to work because clearly it's not enforceable. We were mentioning RAPEX. 80% of products which are spotted by the market surveillance authorities in RAPEX are coming from non-EU origin. They don't have the cultural background. They don't know well the EU body of legislation. How, I mean, they are not very encouraged to comply with legislation if they are not accompanied. So it has to be a role to play to be played by the marketplace. They cannot go on being the facilitators of this conscious or unconscious cheating on the rules. So they have to act at least when they are made aware of unlawful behavior of one of their hosted clients. In conclusion, I would say we need to have a responsible person, yes, within the EU for stopping making available the products which would not be compliant as much as possible, but making this person liable for the non-compliance of the product itself is not possible. It wouldn't stand in the court. So we need to have an intelligent market surveillance system, and that's why we are so much pushing for the Article 8 of the Commission proposal to be put in place. This Article 8 is about memoranda of understanding between businesses and authorities, and we believe that with the amendments of the European Parliament to ensure that these memoranda will be open, transparent, and not biased or not risking to bias the behavior of market surveillance authorities, then we believe it will bring something really positive positive for a more efficient and effective market surveillance in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Well, let's hope that Article 8 will be there. Finally, regarding enforcement of those legislative proposals, our last speaker is Davide Rossi, who since 2017 is president of the Optime Federation, and it is the permanent observatory for the protection of electronic market in Italy. Optime is a joint initiative grouping manufacturers, retailers, online and offline, with consortiums and other stakeholders working together to raise public awareness, to investigate anomalies, and to encourage enforcement from competent authorities. Davide, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You said everything. It's everything I wanted to explain about what we're doing. Good afternoon. I will try to bring some experiences. I know that it was a long day. A lot of things has been discussed, so it's not very easy to find new things to say, because I really found that, and this is very encouraging, many of the things I wanted to say have already been described and so well. So thank you very much again, Mr. Grimaud. Thank you very much for this invitation, and also to EucoLight, which created our first link. Is really an honor for me to speak, because we have just started just a few months ago, and this is the first opportunity that I have to explain to an international audience like today what we try to do with Optime in Italy. I start with this. Any presentation is always an iceberg. I don't know. I like to put every time. Also, whatever is the issue, I put the iceberg. Sounds very well. But in this case, I think has a meaning, because this is the old motto. This was Tito Livius in the Aburbe Condita. A soldier in Rome said, "We shall feel very good here," and they founded Rome over that. And so this is the principle. In this situation, we don't feel very good. We don't feel Optime. Optime is, of course, an acronym for Observatory for the Protection of the Market, blah, blah, blah. But also the meaning is, this is not, we don't like that it is like this. We don't like that there is a part of the market which is fully legitimate, which is seen by everybody, and a big part which is unknown, which is mysterious, which is dark web, or how can we call it? And this can only get worse, because the level of adoption of internet is now going to lower social level people. So people more and more will be careful of prices, and prices will go down. And I like to call the real names of the people involved. If someone wants to challenge Amazon, there's only one possibility to be better: to push more far away the border of moral hazard. The only way to compete with Amazon is to be more illegal than Amazon. Nobody will be able to be better, stronger, faster, richer. If a new operator, whatever it is, China, South Africa, whatever it is, Italy, whatever it will be, our Minister of Telecommunication wants Italy to start a new Netflix. I don't know, he said we shall do Italian Netflix soon. But okay, the parallelism with television, maybe I will also try to use, because we'll have also meaning. The point is, if someone wants to challenge Amazon, must be illegal. Must be, I want to say, more illegal, or must be more hazardous. And this we cannot accept at all. This is something that we as citizens, not representing companies, retailers, or whatever it is, as citizens of this small world, we cannot accept that there will be a so big dark part of what's going on in our social economic life. And so this is, I take it very far from ancient Rome to the future of the universe, but this is the reason why we started to go together and to try to do something. We try to do what is possible. Of course, it's difficult to change the world. This is the profile of online shoppers in Italy. It doesn't say so much in reality. It says that more or less men and women buy online, that more or less all the ages, more or less all the level of education. Of course, the highest is the medium, because the majority of the people has a medium level of education, and more or less North and South is the same way. South is more slow in the adoption of new technologies, but at the same time has less shop, less commercial centers, and so they are more pushed to buy online. The surprising thing is that 41% of online shoppers is unemployed. And this is, for me, very, very funny to see. I don't know how this can be, but apparently this is the result. But probably someone using someone else's money, or I don't know what it is there is. The other point, very important to start with this, is that online shops are considered not less reliable than legitimate shops. So we have to say, as long as people is now getting more and more involved in this, we have people which are maybe buying for the first time today. For someone it's surprising because people has already bought a lot of things, but for someone else it can happen that today, for the first time, someone is making that click. And these people is very vulnerable because, of course, they don't have a knowledge, they don't have an experience. Other things is increasing the use of mobile phones to buy. And this is tremendously dangerous because you cannot see everything. Maybe you see only a piece, you don't see an advice, or maybe you think that your telephone is in that moment a not very good connection and so this pop-up is missing. And so you tend to accept and you tend to buy, sometimes not even realizing exactly what you bought. This is something that we have to take in consideration when we discuss about the problem. The problem is what we have already mentioned many times, plus in Italy we have the problem that we have a very slow civil judiciary system. And so to go for unfair competition against someone is, of course, very expensive, very long, and generally useless. And so we tried to look for other solutions. The idea was we must create an independent structure backed by the people who have an advantage of this unfair competition. And when we are representing collective interests, there is not the risk of being perceived like someone who wants to fight against competitors using public authorities. There is not the risk of a corruption feeling because it's not a single company speaking with a single policeman and saying this is a bad guy, but it's a full common effort of the legitimate operators which are asking for proper action to public authorities. And we have also positive experiences. There is the very famous actions of anti-piracy. In any country there is, in Belgium it's called BAF, Belgian Anti-Piracy Federation. In France, ALPA, Association contre la piraterie audiovisuelle. In the British Video Association made FACT, Federation Against Copyright Theft. So this sector has reacted and they have achieved good results. And so I think we can certainly do the same. And of course, this is since the very beginning, Coca-Cola as inspectors buying draft Coca-Cola and checking in the lab if it's real Coca-Cola or the pub owners is making some kind of manipulation with this brown product. So we think we can do the same. We have to open what we're doing to cooperation, public authorities, and we have to choose the right level of dialogue with the public authorities. But if we do this at national level, with all the big names involved, we have a good opportunity to be listened. What we do basically, we monitor the market. Means there are a few guys, students, general, university students, the unemployed that we mentioned before, that we said, guys, we make a small contract to you and buy what you like. But what your university, your roommate in university is saying, I would like the tablet, buy it. I would like a new washing machine, buy it. Try to look for the best prices and look for something crazy. Don't tell us about the level of pricing, don't tell us nothing, because we don't want antitrust troubles, of course. We let these guys to be free consumers looking for good option, good opportunities, messages arriving in Facebook, whatever it is, buy it, we pay. And of course, we give back. We have the 15 days time to reverse the buy, and we go back to the online shop, to say, we are not very happy. So this is also a way to check if they are reliable and if they respect the law, the consumer's right. And when we buy those, we make a small investigation. Of course, basically we see which is this company. And if the company has the minimum capital invested and one employee and 2,000 products in sale, this sounds already strange for us. And so we try to go a little bit further with this investigation. And then when we see that this activity is certainly a criminal activity, we speak to telecommunication police. We have, of course, created, we have explained, we made our activity to clarify to the public authorities who we are and who we are. I'm very happy also that we have here, maybe I can say Mr. Torricelli, representative of the Italian Ministry of Interior Affairs. And we have, of course, we are entitled to speak to this level. And we have chosen only one channel of communication. Not that every company has a friend in this command, another in other headquarters, the marshal, the tenant, the captain. This would be a complete mess, would not work. We have one only channel of communication with the Minister of Interior Affairs and the Division of Telecommunication Police, and we report to them when we see that it's something which is certainly criminal. All the rest, which is non-compliance to consumer rights, not the availability to set, advertising not proper, not availability of the products, we transmit to antitrust authority, which has a special division on consumer rights. So this is the two levels of activity. Antitrust authority for the civil, let's say, and police for criminal. And what we find, sometimes we can find a receipt of stolen goods. Some other times it's simply a fraud because the product is never coming. Other times we find TV sets which don't have the proper standards, but this has not been announced. And so this is also a fraud in trade because I don't know in any country, maybe here it's not the same, but in Italy is no more allowed to sell TV sets without HEVC standards. And so this, to sell these products is a fraud to consumer because sooner or later they will not work anymore when we shall switch off the digital terrestrial one. So we do this and we present complaints to the competent authorities. And this activity at the end of a year, but we have not yet done the first time because we have not finished the first year of activity, we submit to the national audience in the Chamber of the Representatives. We shall make an annual report. We speak about the problem of the market of electronic equipments in the country. What is the good thing? What is the bad thing? What is the distortion of the market going on? And what is the disadvantage for the society? The membership, you have already mentioned, so thank you very much. I can skip this slide, and is what we do. The federation is already, I am president of the observatory, which is the federation, but my main role is director general in IRES, which is the association of retailers. Brick and mortar and also pure player online. We have also a price, which is a pure player in our association. It's not a member of Amazon. Theoretically, Amazon could not be a member of IRES because to be a member, you must have at least 70% of your income coming from electronics. And Amazon is not, also if they wanted, maybe they would not like to join the association, but in any case, our limit is, IRES is the association of the companies which are specialized in electric and electronic equipment. So we have clear that our target is this, not food, not grocery, only this kind of components. Of course, in Optima, on the contrary, everybody can join. So who has an interest in having a more, let's say, correct market, a more fair competition in the market can join. Some example of the cases that we have put in place. This was a big case. Police declared 50 million euro VAT evasion. So this means a turnover of 250. We have to check a little bit, maybe the amount is a little bit different for one thing concerning VAT on the electronic products that I will explain in the next slide. But in any case, the number were so big. This company was growing and mushrooming and people was buying because actually the prices were very good. If you don't pay VAT on certain products, you don't have a small saving in VAT with the products which don't have the so-called reverse charge. Reverse charge is when you pay VAT only at the end when you sell to consumer. This applies to gold, to marble, to mobile phones, to tablet, to PC, and to console. These products, they are distributed through the distribution chain without VAT. And only after the finals, this is the same in all Europe, I think. Huh? I don't know if some country have an exception on this, but majority of the countries, they do this. And this is a EU-oriented decision to control better the payment of VAT. The old principle was, it's easier to enter in a shop and to see if someone is selling something and if he's paying the VAT, than to find one guy in the distribution chain. And secondly, if I make a fake company, so paper company in the distribution chain, one guy is criminally responsible, but all the others, they have done nothing wrong. They received the normal invoice and they have reduced the VAT to pay because they said the other guy paid, and I don't know if he paid or not. So in this way, and this is a good idea, reverse charge is identifying the exact person who has to pay the VAT, which is the guy at the end of the chain, the guy which is directly dialoguing with the consumer, the guy which is getting the money at the end of the day. In this way, it's easier to identify who has to pay. The problem is that in many cases, these companies don't pay. And we shall see the next. Other cases, okay, I also don't want to enter too much because in this activity we're doing with the police, we have also, of course, the need to be very, there is judicial secrecy on many things. So we take responsibility to not to open our files before we are allowed to do so. So I go fast to the last step, which is the three things that we would like to have a better action against these kind of problems. First of all, extend responsibility of marketplace platform has already been spoken, and I think we shall have again to speak about this. VAT, reverse charge application to platforms, which is to say, the moment the consumer is giving the money to the platform is the moment where the sale is finished. So this means VAT has to be paid, which is to say, if I go on marketplace on Amazon and I sell something, the guy who has to pay the VAT is Amazon and not me, because it's Amazon which is collecting the money from consumer. And we have prepared an amendment, and we hope that Mr. Conte, which needs to say that more money are needed for our country, will adopt already in this budget law 2019. So we have prepared this. We wish that this will be accepted. But of course, it's something which is making immediately money for the country and is not against any violation, any European rule concerning VAT or reverse charge. Because this is just a decision given to any country to decide where, at which level of the chain, the VAT has to be paid. And so I hope this will be supported. The first conversation we had are very positive. Next week will arrive the text of the law in the parliament, and the day after there will be time for the amendments. I hope to be supported. And the third is, of course, the increased focus on EU dealers. Between the members of Optime, we have also the people of the photo sector, the cameras, and they are fully destroyed because nobody is paying anymore the full price for a very expensive camera because they buy from China, and it is sent in Italy in our case, but in Europe in general, without paying import taxes because it's sold generally like a no-value product or a personal gift or a personal sale. And so this is certainly something that we have to look more. I have finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossi, to energize us at the end of the afternoon and to tell us about the initiative that is taken by various sectors, various type of stakeholders in Italy for compliance. Okay, we take questions. We have a few conclusions and many questions. And then we have a cocktail, and then I have a few practical announcements to make. Okay, Bea, I see a gentleman near the door. Please, maybe specify if make a statement or if you ask a question to the panel.
It's a question to the panel or anyone who fits the bill to answer. We've heard a lot about the problems, and there's been debates around who's responsible, who's not, and the person representing the e-commerce business is also pointed us in the direction of the directives. My question is, what do you think should be the common denominator here? Or what do you think should be the solution-focused approach, rather than debating on who should be responsible and who's not? Because I think this is a problem that will continue to grow, and if nothing's done about it, like the gentleman said, it's just going to become worse. So what do you think should be the common approach or denominator to resolve this problem?
To whom is it addressed exactly? Do you want? Do you want an answer from whom?
The person representing the e-commerce businesses.
Sorry for the names. I don't know what happened. I stay far from this one.
First, we think the powers of supervising authorities and resources should be increased. I don't know what's happening. Okay, maybe I do it without phone. Is it okay? First, we like supervisory authorities to have more resources, because what we see, a lot of market surveillance is lacking, a lot of resources. So supervising is not as effective as we think it could be. What we think is a very sympathetic idea is brought by the Italian Mr. Rossi to give serious business a chance to apply to supervisors to come into action against rough traders. I think serious business want to be serious, and they don't want to have a competitive disadvantage by these rough traders. They have also the same interest in removing these rough traders from the market as consumers have. So we think that should increase. And we also think it should be there should be more transparency about the rules. Imagine having a small companies with 3 or 4 employees, which are the major companies. They are small and medium enterprises. They have limited access to the rules. They try to be compliant, but they just don't know. So I think we can win a lot by giving a lot of more transparent information, creating platforms with information on VAT duties, for instance, also for people coming from outside the EU. And of course, we need rules. And of course, we need to tackle this VAT issue. And we think we're already dealing with it on a European level. There are proposals now to tackle this issue, and we think it goes in the good direction, although it can have some more, let me say, fine-tuning, which makes it more let me say, enforceable and more practical to deal with it. And what we also see when we look, for instance, to the WEEE, and we see there's a registration obligation to register it in every member state. I think it would be it could be far more easier if we make also on this level a kind of one-stop shop, only registering in one member state and having a platform or having an interchange of this information between all the supervisors in the EU. That would help definitely. And I think serious business wants to be compliant because they take their consumers serious, and if the consumers don't trust you, you don't have any business. So we think we should also cooperate with a serious business with the supervisors and to have the market really uniform and free of rough traders.
I have another question. I'm Maurice Peef, representing Signify, former Philips Lighting. I think we heard a lot about trying to address it at the back door, which means surveillance, trying to catch incompliant products, incompliant producers. But I think that will never solve the issue. I think the picture of the iceberg was very relevant. With market surveillance, we will only catch a small tip of the iceberg. The biggest part will be underwater, whatever we do in surveillance, because there will always be insufficient resources to go after every incompliant product. So I think some way or another we should try to close the front door. And that requires new regulations. I think it could be putting responsibility towards platforms that they should check on products and producers whether they are compliant, so they need a checklist, and only if the producers and the products are, let's say, meeting all the requirements, they are allowed to sell via their platform. I think that's more the direction we should move to. And that's a question to the people from the DGs, Environment and Growth. How do you think about this?
Yeah. There is an e-commerce directive that already applies. So there are a number of responsibilities also for people who are doing e-commerce, which is in the e-commerce directive. Now, at the moment, there are no immediate plans to revise the e-commerce directive. That might happen during the next commission, but at the moment there are not so plans to my knowledge. But it's true that a number of e-commerce platforms could be considered as distributors, because it depends on your role. So if as a platform you sell products, according to most non-food legislation, you are a distributor, which means you've got a number of obligations. You have to verify that product is compliant. You have to ensure that all the product complies with rules. There are a number of obligations set out in union harmonization legislation. My understanding is that this is not yet entirely and fully understood by a number of platforms. Many of them already know, but it's true that if you are selling a product to a consumer in our legislation, you're a distributor. And I think at the moment the most professional platforms do know it, but it's a fact that a number of them, and certainly if they're starting with something new, they're not necessarily aware of their obligations. And then the role of market surveillance kicks in, because then it's important that market surveillance indeed inform these people that if they're selling products, you cannot only do business. If you do business in Europe, you sell to European consumers, then you've got a number of obligations. And these obligations apply to all distributors, online and offline. Bettina, do you want to add something?
Well, yes, for the case of of these free riders under the extended producer schemes, there of course you also have, well, first of all, I agree with the changing the legislation. For the WE directive, as said also, so on one hand I explained we have distributors, so in principle for the obligations of distributors, platforms to some extent are also concerned, and also regarding producer to the extent that in particular, for example, they market own products and so on and so forth. But well, so this is already there. Okay, there might be some aspect which is not covered, but we have also seeing it's not only an issue of not wanting to do what is the obligation, but as was also said, is of not being aware of it. And I mean, there was a study done for this EPR in relation to we from the OECD, and was said the main factor is unawareness. So it's to create awareness, and there we are also now in the field of the obligation under the waste legislation. We have the so-called producer responsibility organizations who are organizing the producers' responsibilities, and we are also, well, I would think there is also a lot which can be done in creating awareness at this level, in working together, and so on and so forth. So not only from us, because if we change, we again have to enforce and inform about what we have changed. So we have made now common rules how these systems are to be organized, how they are to be transparent. We will look specifically what is the aspect of online sales, which where we need to give maybe more guidance. If we now to start changing the whole thing again, we will never do what actually we have to do in making work what we have.
I just wanted to add also on behalf of the e-commerce industry, sometimes regarding this responsible person and the platforms, sometimes we also have to understand that the platform cannot verify everything, because it's also not always that the platform sells the things. There are also traders who are operating on the platform, and it's not always possible for the platform to verify the compliance of the product. This is one, but of course it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be verified. And then there are different platforms. When we compare, for example, Amazon or eBay, there are completely different business models. And this law, like as we always say, that one law can't fit all. So if we think right now of Amazon, who has establishments across Europe and also fulfillment centers, which are actually now being discussed as one point of verifying the compliance of the product, then they might even be able to be responsible for the compliance as a big platform. But when we think about the eBay and how they operate, that person sells one small thing to another consumer in Europe, then we don't know how it would work, and it could kill one business model which has been successful and really loved by people.
May I add something? Thank you. Yes, I agree with your position, Trin. The point is that we have, I think, to consider that we have to separate a little bit all the things that we have in the same basket. When we speak about platform responsibility, reference is made to the e-commerce directive, which in 2000, so 20 years ago, was putting in the same basket Instagram, YouTube, Booking, Alibaba, Amazon, and eBay. So I think that the border should be to identify, first of all, the platforms which are selling physical goods. Second, the platforms which are putting in contact a professional operator and a consumer. At that stage, this platform should put in place, this is my view, this is the amendment that I've prepared in the last days, should have a system which is not only algorithm, but is also man-based for a random control, at least, on what they put in place. They must show that they have proportionately done something to avoid these kind of things. Proportionate means everything, but also antitrust regulations sometimes are based on what is reasonable, or privacy, the new privacy law. So the idea is put in place something. By the way, only 1% of the turnover of the platforms is used for paying salaries. If a little bit more salaries are paid by the platforms, frankly, would not so bad. And some people could be hired. So one of the guys which are now hiring to buy products maybe will be inside the platforms to check a little bit what's sold. This is, I don't know, simple ideas. This is, I don't think this will change the world, but 2, 3 things to a little bit not put everything in the same, because I understand you cannot control the photo that people is putting on Instagram. This is a completely different thing. So business to private, physical goods, of course not Spotify. This, I think, could be borders that if there is an agreement also in the sector of that you represent, this could be a very, very big step ahead.
Romuald Wojtkowiak, Electroeco, the Sears organization. Thank you very much for interesting presentations, because what we have seen today and what you've made me aware is that we've been so much talking about the non-compliant product, and for me, non-compliant product has 2 aspects, 2 dimensions. First of all, non-compliant because it's unsafe, technically unsafe for the consumer. Secondly, duty is not paid, VAT is not paid, the authorized representative is not nominated, and the like. But on the other hand, you know, EBA has made a very good example of a product which is also not compliant, but it can be fully safe, you know, just with all the certificates you name, you know, but it's a total misfit on the market. And the example of American lamps, which can be theoretically ordered into Europe and applied in a socket, you know, is just a good example. So for me, non-compliant also means which is risky for the consumer. And I agree also with Trin that, for example, we need to train consumers, but the difference in E27 cap used in Europe and E26 in the States is 1 millimeter in length, which I believe most of us wouldn't recognize from a distance of 1 meter. Still, the product is not compliant for me. And the question is, a lot of energy is used to solve the aspects number 1, but for me the question is how the aspect number 2, non-compliant because of being a misfit, how this is being tackled.
To whom is the question addressed? Romuald. Good answer.
Yeah. So in theory, there you've got, on the consumer rights, you've got a number of possibilities, because if you see that it's a misfit, you could simply send it back to the seller, and this is something you could easily do, I think.
If you have a lamp, yes. The lamp is socket, American lamp, you have fireworks at home, there's nothing to be sent back.
I think when you ask me, I think the biggest problem is that we are not aware about the fact that this 1 millimeter is failing. So first we think that there should be a transparency on the product itself for which market it is meant. And we will have the same problem with geo-blocking. It might be that you go to another country, buy something which is compliant with the standard of that state, and you go home and you try to use it in your home, and it will not be compliant because you have another standard. Think for instance about adding electrical plugs or something like that, you know. And so we think one of the best ways would be to be transparent for producers on for which market this product is meant. For instance, when we talk about this American bulb and we talk about this European bulb, it should be on the package. This is only meant for the European market, or this is only meant for the American market, which shouldn't prevent people who are, for instance, having a lot of American equipment in their home and to buy a American bulb for use on the European market. But it should be clear to them that they buy something which is only fit for American equipment. I think transparency. I think a transparency obligation would help a lot.
Hello. It's been very interesting listening to what you've been saying. There's a few observations that I think I'd just like to say coming out of what you've been talking about. The first one, David mentioned goods coming in from outside of the EU in comparison to goods already in the EU, in warehouses. And I think it's important to realise that you've got two types of transaction. You have stuff coming directly from, say, China in the mail, and then you have stuff already in a warehouse in the EU. And what's important is that a lot of consumers expect the item the next day. Now, it's not possible for Chinese retailers to send it next day from China, so they're very, very keen to get their goods into warehouses in the EU. And I noticed that there was a mention of, in the supply chain, with regards to WEEE regulations, I've heard that same phrase with regards to VAT fraud. In fact, I was involved in the presentation to the Public Accounts Committee in Westminster, and Amazon were present, and it was a discussion on VAT fraud, and they were very, very keen to say they weren't in the supply chain. So it would be very useful to define what being in the supply chain is, because I think if you knock out those European warehouses, then you're only dealing with goods coming in by post from outside the EU. So, and then so the other point that I wanted to mention was that the platforms are not clear at the moment with regards to the perspective of the consumer. If I want to buy a product, it's very, very difficult to buy something knowing what you're buying. I've tried to buy a battery for my phone and ended up numerous occasions thinking I was buying a product from a UK supplier, and it turns up from China and it's a counterfeit. So the information on the platform is actually incorrect. So if that was clarified and people knew where they were buying things from, they would know if they were buying it from a local warehouse or if they were buying it from China. So one final point, and that was VAT fraud is much easier on the high street or in physical business, because nobody knows you haven't paid the VAT if the window cleaner is charging cash. All of these transactions are recorded on databases. In theory, it should be much easier to catch people for VAT fraud in online retail than it should be on the high street. So those are...
Maybe I can already comment on this, where you're buying from. So right now, this platform to business regulation at least already tries to give transparency about it, that it should be indicated from whom you're buying. Are you buying from the platform itself or from the trader? Yeah, of course, but the regulation is right now under discussion, hopefully adopted before the elections.
On your second observation, I would like to add that exactly what you call warehouses, we call fulfillment centers. And we are trying to cover them now, because a number of them argue that they're just doing logistics. They simply say that they're a transport company. In our view, they're more than a transport company, yeah? Because you are doing transport or postal services when you already transport close parcels from one point to the other. If you, however, you've got your products on stock in a warehouse, and on behalf of a third party, you pack the product and you send it off to the consumer on behalf of a third party. In our view, you're a fulfillment center, and that's what we want to include also in market surveillance. Because a number of these warehouses argue that they're not covered. They say, we have no obligation whatsoever. We don't even have an obligation to be inspected by market surveillance. And this is a loophole that we also want to close. And where you see a very wide consensus also in the sector. Because in the sector of fulfillment center, you've got many businesses trying to do a good job, but a number of them are actually using this loophole to just escape from any possible obligation and to make as much money in a very short period.
Hervé Grimaud, I'm running a producer organization for more than 10 years now in the electrical equipment field. And Bettina, I had the feeling that you explained that more or less everything was in the law. It was now the duty of member states to modify things, to have things going better. I'm not totally in line with that. I think that we have to go through modification of the law at the European level about the EPR obligation for platform mainly. I think that you know that free riders we have in both worlds, internet and brick and mortar. And I'm going to tell you a story. We are working with retailers for 10 years now, taking back the product they get back from the customer themselves. And for a while we tell them, please check whether all your the company selling the product for you are fulfilling their obligations. I said yes. And when I said, okay, now we're going to stop to collect the same way, to provide the same service, if you don't check whether or not all your suppliers are fulfilling their obligations. Suddenly, they put, and the buyers clearly state to all the suppliers that if you are not registered to comply with the WE directive or other, we will not sell your product anymore. I can tell you that it's changed tremendously the attitude of the producers. Why it may not work with the platform? They don't collect product, even though they have the same obligation, they don't collect, and we don't provide any service. There is no external pressure to push the platform to ask their suppliers to fulfill their obligation. That's why I personally think that to help us to have a level playing field, which is acceptable for all partners, we need that at European level, you modify the law to state clearly, like you do for the market surveillance, what it's done for VAT, that platforms or internet actors are responsible to check whether or not all their supplier, we call you call them as you want, are registered properly in each member state register. And I really ask you whether or not it is possible to move in that direction. I think at least you have to consider it. Thank you.
Happy to, yes. No, well, first I didn't completely get where you said that it works with what is with the retailers and different in this case where the legislation would be different. Well, as I said before, we have general provisions in how the working of the extended producer responsibility obligations is to be made more transparent with, I only cited now some articles, but which are the most relevant. And we will make guidance on this. So that is what we will do now, going into the direction what you said. We will not for the moment. Also because, there are some elements where it might be, I think, in part an enforcement issue. Maybe you tell me this is really because something is missing in the legislation, but we will not for the moment change the WE directive on this. I said we have completed it, because the general requirements on extended producer responsibility, although they are in the Waste Framework Directive, they will apply also to complete the ones. And so there will be guidance on this issue, one thing. And then I think this is the main. And then, of course, here in the discussion, I think we still have to see a lot also how this is working in practice and which are now really the actors to be made more or which should not be covered and to be made responsible for what. that is still, I mean, I think here, and that is, as I said, it will be part, this will be hopefully coming out in the process of making our guidelines for us. Now, what I've heard here, which I found, by the way, interesting, when it was said that there is this this commitment of some platforms from this summer on safe products, product safety pledge. I wonder, and I would like to suggest, while these kind of initiatives and self-commitments, they can also take up things which are not only product safety, but which are also compliance with obligations for registration and for participating in the treatment of, well, in financing the treatment of waste from that product. So I would think this could be, for example, also suggested. But yes.
That was since a long time. Mr. Taverne, yeah, I will pass you the mic. And one or two more questions and short answers because we need to conclude. Yeah?
It will not be a question, but possibly some, let's say, some lessons that I learned today and some recommendations. Yes. So, first of all, I'm coming from the tire industry, so quite a different industry compared to we and lighting industry. But why I'm here is because, let's say, there are lots of commonalities between the different EPR schemes. The free riders, we have the same level of free riding, let's say, in the tire industry. For example, it's between about 20% we are collecting above the obligations, for example, in Spain. We believe that this requires some sort of multidisciplinary approach because most of the issues are related to the notion, the definition of producer and and the importer. And when you look a little bit more in detail, then you see, oh, the importer is related to some fiscal representation. So it's related to fiscal issues. So there is a need to have a multidisciplinary approach and possibly, let's say, there can be added value in having some sort of informal groups, coalition, let's say, of EPR, let's say, at least of EPR schemes from different waste streams in getting together and exchanging on what are the issues, what are the solutions that we see, what are the commonalities, if there are some differences, and then how we can, let's say, how can we promote altogether that exchange of best practices and how to implement it. So I'm quite happy to be present here, and I think that in the future we will further collaborate with packaging, lighting industry, and other, let's say, other EPR streams that might be interested in collaborating.
If I may react to this, I mean, that's exactly the proposal of this memoranda of understanding that will, if eventually the Council will support this part of the Commission proposal, offer a legal basis for establishing cooperations between the private sector and authorities in doing a better job, because we have the knowledge about the issues linked with non-compliance in each sectors, but we don't have the legitimacy for bringing this information to the authorities that are in charge of enforcing the legislation. So I think this is one of the most, let's say, ambitious point of the proposal of the Commission that needs to be secured, because if they don't have money, if they don't have human resources, they need to have more knowledge and intelligence on the market practice. Thank you.
Last question. Okay, thank you. Jamie Patel from LVMH again. Maybe just as a quick reaction to Mrs. Law's comment about what self-regulation, why can't self-regulation do more than just what it currently does? And frankly, the answer is because it doesn't work. Even if you look at the product safety pledge that was signed by these marketplaces earlier this year, it pledged to respond to customer concerns about products that they thought weren't safe within 5 days. I don't think that's really something that goes well beyond what is currently legally required of them, and I don't think it in any way addresses real consumer concerns. We've seen other self-regulatory attempts from platforms that have gone nowhere, and in one particular case on terrorism has led to the Commission actually putting out a legislative proposal on the issue. And it doesn't work because there's no stick, and it comes to that point that if you want responsible traders to have a level playing field, you need a legal framework around everyone to make sure that everyone is brought to the table, willingly or unwillingly, to do the right thing. And to that point, I think it would be worthwhile. It was very encouraging to hear Mr. Ingalls talk about how he was looking to other DGs for inspiration. It's a real joined-up regulation, which is very welcome to hear. To look also perhaps at the data protection framework, which has been created by GDPR, where there's a general obligation on all actors, regardless of where they are in the value chain, to take a responsible approach to data. I think we can look at having a responsible approach to product safety, to product authenticity, and all the other aspects which we've talked about today as a general part of your responsibility of being a financial actor in this chain and making money from it. My question is a bit more specific, and I hope it appeals to at least some people on the panel. In trying to facilitate the lives of market surveillance authorities, do you see any new scope for trying again with secure electronic labeling for products? I think maybe I would also like to hear from Orglim on this issue, if I could. Sorry, just to explain, secure electronic labeling would allow products to have electronic labels where not all the information is put onto the product or the product packaging, but it's done through electronic means where you have a code which you can then reference in a secure way, in an authentic way, to show that product is actually what it says it is, rather than just looking at a CE mark, which we all know is very easily copied.
Yeah, well, this is something which is quite important, and I think for many aspects it would be a facilitation, because there are more and more screens that are attached to all kinds of technical products. But still, I mean, if there is a failure, an issue with the product, the consumer or the user of the product needs to have at least the basic information to go back to the manufacturer of the product for getting it repaired. So you cannot have everything in electronic format. But we believe that it would be very useful for many information that can be consulted, I mean, that are there for market surveillance purpose, mostly.
Thank you for your question. We looked at in it a few years ago, because personally, but this is my very personal view, this is the future. This is something that we should all look into and that manufacturers should look into, because it would solve a number of problems. It would solve a number of problems for traceability, but it could also facilitate, for example, the verification of small, low-volume consignments. Because if you put that to a scanner, you could immediately see what's compliant and what's not compliant. So we started looking into it 2 years ago. We met a lot of opposition, and if you can read it in somewhere, it's hidden in the impact assessment. It's somewhere around page 800 or so. It's somewhere deep down, because there was little support from industry on it, because obviously it involved costs. But in my personal view, it's the future. And you already see it for pharmaceutical products. You already see it for example, marine equipment. But it's something that needs to be considered in the medium term, because first of all, what you need to then to have is a kind of unique standard that everybody would be using, because there's an identifier, and there's several already standards out there. There are ISO standards on unique identifiers. So it's something that we would like to see industry also taking some interest. Until now, we've seen little interest in practice. Perhaps it's also our mistake, because we've done a very broad consultation for all sectors, and so in certain sectors are not really interested. For example, shoe labeling, textile labeling, they're less interested. Well, And obviously that decreases the figure of support for any possible e-compliance. So at the end of the day, we dropped it. But I do believe, and this is my personal conviction, that this is the future. It will facilitate a lot of things. Because if industry would pick it up, you could do a lot of valuable things, and it also would be a good means, for example, against counterfeiting and other things. You would, by one go, solve many problems. But there, again, it's also up to industry to think, how could we do this in 5 years' time, for example? But let's say here, this is also the reason, because there was little support from member states and from industry to do it, that we didn't include it in the proposal. But in my view, it's the future.
As we come to labeling, we also agree that if we have not a common market, it's on labeling. And it's on information on the product, technical standards, information about how to use the product and so on. If we see in Europe, we are achieving a lot in regulating consumer rights in a common way. But when we go to labeling and we go to information, it's a mess. It's not harmonized at all, and we think there should be done some efforts to come to harmonizing and labeling so that everybody understands what's on the label and sees it in a transparent way. We think there's a very big chance, especially since we see that we are more and more ordering not from a screen but by voice control, where we don't see any product information. We just say to Alexia, please order me a bottle of milk by that grocery shop, and we don't see any information. And we think, especially for these situations, we should have a future-proof common labeling legislation.
Very short. Very short. I would like also to mention one thing, which is quite important, is that an electronic system, QR code or something similar, it can also very easily be falsified, forged, and point at the genuine declaration of conformity of another manufacturer. So this is also the problem, is if such a system, harmonized, would be put in place, what would be the means to check that it reflects the reality?
Will it be the last word? Okay, I think so. No, I think we will have opportunities to discuss during some drinks in a minute. Let's start with practical announcements. The presentations of today, they will be available. We will send to everyone who registered the presentations via a link imminently, unless some speakers oppose. Good. They don't oppose. Needs to be asked. Secondly, the workshop of today is broadcasted, web streamed, so that a number of press correspondents and national authorities could be with us. I would like to mention, because I know that they were there with us today, the Environmental Enforcement Agency of Germany, Mrs. Anne Sachse, and the Environmental Enforcement of Ireland, Mr. Michael Owens, who are following the workshop from their office. Yeah? Okay, and I will try to make very few conclusions so that I don't delay your time. A final practical, no, it's not a suggestion. I hope we will find your way easily, because you know that the Schuman area is now blocked due to the European Brexit Summit. But there are alternatives. You can go to a Malbec metro station or find where exactly is the bus 12 to the airport. Okay, that's good luck, but maybe the hotel knows exactly. It is in one street just here, but we need to find exactly where. And I've studied the map of the public transport of Brussels. It's not very transparent. Okay. Few conclusions. First of all, a big thank you for your presentations, dear speakers, for your reaction, members of the public. Today we had high-level representatives from the institutions, from the federations, from NGOs, companies and associations, and many other relevant stakeholders. So it shows that the issue is of interest to all of us. It's not easy to address the situation. E-selling among EU countries is already difficult to address, although with coordination between countries it could be partly solved. But e-selling coming from non-EU country is another thing. We need very clear legislation. I think our chairman mentioned it, very clear legislation to have a real level playing field. Nevertheless, and that's what is nice today, a wealth of ideas, initiatives have been shared by authorities and private parties. But it seems not enough, because the gap is still there. So what is needed at European level? Well, in a global economy where e-commerce will become the driving force, that's clear, for consumer models, product responsibility needs to be met locally where the product is sold. If not, traders will be undetected. We need a final responsible person. I know that there is another wording from the parliament, a final responsible person at local level. Otherwise, administrations cannot act. So who should be responsible? It's clear that marketplaces have a great part to play here. But they're not alone, but they have a great role to play. They are the doors. All these goods enter through the European market. So it makes sense to make them liable for the compliance of goods sold through their portals. It is the original producer, if this original producer is not complying. European Union through VAT legislation, and some member states already, they are taking interesting approach in their legislation to make marketplace responsible. Spain, for example, with the draft of the revision of the packaging legislation. Germany, with VAT obligations for marketplaces if the seller is not compliant. These are examples of these initiatives. The goods package, which is under approval, looks quite promising for compliance, but is it solving the problem? Appointing an EU responsible for compliance, that sounds good, but can an administration go against this figure? Philippe Portalier has expressed some doubts and some considerations about that. Maybe the gap is still there, although some additional measures have been set up in this future piece of legislation that could be quite useful, like the Memorandum of Understanding that has been mentioned. It is also important that the e-commerce directive must enshrine the liabilities in the same way. E-commerce liabilities cannot expand or shrink depending on the topic. VAT, safety, environment, they should be addressed liabilities in a very coherent way. There must be a coherent framework. This also means that coordinating enforcement action at supranational or national level should be achieved. And by the way, let me tell you something. As I mentioned, the German Enforcement Authority for the Environment is following the workshop, and Mrs. Axe has sent us a recommendation to remind us that this network that Mrs. Lotz has mentioned is quite active, effective, and has come up with a common form for notification to enforcement authorities, and she invites us to share with you this form. That helps. It's for the electronic sector, though, I must say, but that can be serve as a model for enforcement authorities. Okay, so it is important that administration should be coordinated for better action to make enforcement less doubting for individual territories and more cost-effective overall. Customs, tax, and trading standards officials should work in a joined-up fashion with environmental authorities or on product regulations. The goods package could be a good opportunity for this, as Mrs. Lotz has already addressed. Of course, coordination with marketplaces are also needed, and this collaborative approach is needed. Online sellers are part of the solution, as I already said, and they have product information which they can communicate and inform sellers on their obligations. Ways of coordinating with them should also be created. As far as information for consumers, that has been mentioned by the Danish colleague, that sounds helpful and should be enforced. Consumers need to know how green their online basket is and could be also a tool of pressure for compliance. But this does not exempt administration from their regulatory and monitoring obligations. That's it. So we will issue As I said, I will share with you all those presentations, and I hope we can meet. Don't hesitate to contact us at EucoLight for further joint activities. Our colleague from the tiles industry has mentioned that we should have work in networks. Thank you. Thank you. The cocktail is just on your left in this round corridor. Yeah? All the best. Thank you very much.